What?
Good evening. What's happening?
Uh, All right, I'm just catching up.
Mm-hmm. No problem. We're all just catching up. It's Thursday. Everybody getting back into it. Almost time for the weekend, but not quite. So technically, our little version of the weekend, right? Weekend can start on Thursday. That's official.
My weekend starts on Monday.
That's true. We had some things we were going to get started into today. Got
All right.
that looper out so we can mess with that a little bit later as well. Wanted to make sure that everybody can hear everything too. So if we had piano.
Piano sounds good.
Cool. And you can see it on the Meticulous as well, so that's good. You guys can see the notes that we're playing here.
Okay, I got the chat stabilized. And Renk, if you post that many GIFs, the same GIF over and over again, I'm gonna restrict you.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah.
You can, send a GIF or two. That's fine, but
Yeah. Just don't
that's
post
a
it
bit much.
15 times in a row because that's spamming. So your only warning.
And hey, SR, what's happening? See you hanging out in the chat as well. Now that last one we were just listening to there that Ange was doing.
Yeah, I was actually just trying to guess what he was playing there. Hold on, let me switch over to my music machine.
Yeah. For
That's
this one,
a
I was just doing all black notes on that one, so that. Just the black notes on that.
yeah,
One of the easier pentatonics.
That's a Rob Chadwell piano piece that Ange and Gray sang on top of.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that that only those black notes are what he used in what he did, but it's just that those happen to work with it. So this is one of the pentatonics that works with that song. So I'm not trying to say that it was only written with those 5 notes, but those are the 5 notes that I was doing just for that little solo there.
What do you think he was in? G?
I think this was all the black notes. So I was thinking it was either E flat minor pentatonic or G flat major pentatonic. One of your favorites with all the black notes.
Are you kidding me? You think
That's what I'm saying.
what
Is
he was using?
if for that little solo, like if you're not using any chords, just try to hit just the black notes and see what that feels like. See, that's E flat. I was saying G flat actually. This is all the 3 in a row there.
You're right. G flat sounds right. Yeah, I think that is the starting.
That's the thing. Is that for me, I was just going with a melody line, so that's a lot easier to just kind of jump into the black notes to do. But once we start getting into the chords, that's a whole different story. So I think it would be if it were in G flat, and we're talking about, yeah, the B is in there, and the F is in there. The only white notes. So any chords you're making would be all black notes except for B's or F's. And they're all sharps, I guess, at that point. No, the B, sorry, is a double flat. That's that C,
Oh my God!
the C flat.
flat.
not double flat, but C flat. C flat is the B, because you also have a B flat in there. So it's G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, which is a B, D flat, E flat, F, the only one that's not flat, and G flat.
And when would you have to double flat something?
Once you go beyond that, actually, let's see, was it F flat minor, perhaps? I mean, there's like, you know how we go around the circle of fifths and we get to the bottom when we start coming back up. You can consider technically just keep going around. If you just keep going, let's say you're going
You
around the circle
can
of
consider
fifths,
technically just going.
keep going each one around and keep going to the next one and the next one and the next one, so that you keep adding. Once you get to 6 sharps, you go to 7 sharps, 8 sharps, and the way you do that is by double sharpening things at that point, or double flatting things, depending on which side you're going around. So for flatting, you'd be going around the circle of fourths. So you'd be going from C to F to B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, then C flat, then F flat, then I guess, is that C double flat now, or is that back to B flat? Because we can't be back to B flat. So that would have to be something that's probably C double flat at that point, is my guess. Because at that point, we're already beyond 6 flats, 7 flats, and there's only 7 notes in the scale. So once you have 7 flats, you can't really flat anything else, or you start double flatting things.
So that would
So
be
it might be
C
actually.
double flat major.
Actually, no, it can't really be, because that C is in there as well. So I think that's just back to B flat somehow. The main thing was, once we got to, if we count the number of flats that we had, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once we're at G flat, that's already 6 flats. So the C flat is 7 flats, right? And then once you're at that point, I think you're going to the double flats, is what we were saying. And that's where the E flat and the B. We'll have to check on that. But that's where those things would come in, when you start to double flat things.
This would actually be F double flat, and this would be C double flat.
That's what it feels like when it comes around to that, because there's only so many ways to flatten things, and then you start coming back up the other side if you were to shift by slightly. Because once you get to that G flat is where it gets different. The main way I usually look at it, though, is to just try to find the way in from the melody line. So like if you just try from the B flat, A flat, and G flat, and see what those feel like, and the other 2 black notes also, but like it felt like the higher part of the melody line. Let's hear it for the children of tomorrow. Like in that range. And that would tell me that those are all in the scale that we want to work around. So like I try to feel my way in from there. So once we have those notes in, we see like if either of those feel right, like does the E feel right or the F feel right in there, or does neither of them feel right? And if neither one feels right, we might just be into that one pentatonic scale where we're using all the black notes, which makes it easy to find on the keyboard. It's just a little more, it's just difficult to pin down what chords we should be using behind it. But I think for what we were doing before, it started with the G flat. Just to go with that one. But that's not the only song in the world, but it was just one that happened to be in my head because we were playing it before. But that's the beauty of just taking any song and just going with it, is you kind of learn the way it goes together, learn what the melody feels like. Just exploring is the important thing, and whether it's the right instrument or not is the other question, because we did have the flute in there, and that was where that one would probably feel more natural, either as a flute or even as like the voice oohs or ahs.
I'm gonna have to run those tracks through Melody.
That's cheating.
No, not
No, I
nowadays.
know. It is a good learning instrument, actually, and that's the thing is, I had friends who didn't want to do any cover songs at all. They only wanted to do original music, and this is going back 30 years even. But they were like, oh, we started a band and nobody knows how to play anything, so we're just going to all do everything that we do is all going to be brand new. And I'm like, well, we should listen to things that we like and work on how to play covers of things, and that way you learn structure, you learn melody lines, you learn how things are put together. They're like, no, I don't even want to listen to any other music. I don't want to contaminate my, the music that I'm going to make. And I'm like, well, that's going a bit far. It's like, because right now you
Yeah,
don't have any theory, you don't have any skill on the instrument, and we all just kind of jumped onto a new instrument. It's like, let's start with something, right? Like, and to me, covering things is the best way to start. So, it's like we
yeah.
can we can work together on figuring out how to play things, but we should work on how to play things that that other people have written already, and work on our own stuff as well.
Yeah, listening to other music does not contaminate your writing. It should
It helps shape your style, honestly.
influence.
Yeah, exactly.
Find the parts that you are inspired by that you
Mhm.
want to sound like. Artists who say they're not inspired by anything are lying, because it's impossible to play music and not be inspired by something when you try to play it.
Mhm.
It's all been done one way or another. Find your inspirations and which things that sound like how you want to sound.
Absolutely. And when you hear something you like, figure out what it is about it that makes you like it. That's the other thing I like to do is, listening to something that's a funk thing. Well, which part is it that I like? Is it the little guitar chirps? Is it the bass line? Is it the organ? Like, which part of what's going on is the part that I'm really focused on? And if it could be everything, and it could be that, my ear bounces from one thing to another. And that's another thing about being a sound guy, is that my ear is much easier, has a much easier time now of training in on each individual section of what's going on. So I can listen to this vocal or that guitar or that keyboard, and I can like kind of bring each one up in my mind and like hear what it sounds like directly, because I'm kind of focused on that sound.
Yeah, it really helps to separate the instrumentation
Oh yeah.
and the tracks whenever possible, so you can feel out each of the parts.
Hmm.
We're going to look at a MIDI file in a little bit, and
Yeah.
that's where the benefits of being able to look at each instrument and what they do in the whole arrangement.
Oh yeah. And we also did some in the past on the artificial intelligence ones that wrote their own parts in music, and in those you can also break down the individual parts. You can see the bass part versus a guitar part versus a vocal part, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
and a lot of that AI
mhm,
takes from like music theory approach. Like if
mhm,
you've got this bass line or guitar line, the other parts it arranges around it
mhm.
are music theory approach, where it's like, oh, if this is the root chord, then I'm going to throw a third or a fifth on top of it.
One of my favorites for that was when we looked at hook theory, because when you look at certain things there, it'll show you what percentage of songs, in its library, for example, that it examined, went to this one versus that one. Like it'll take the top 100, the top 1,000. It's got tons of songs in the library, so it knows how all these songs go, and it knows all the different chord progressions. And if you can start a chord progression, it'll start narrowing down from all songs to, okay, all songs that start 1 5, okay, and then all songs that start 1 5 2, okay, and then all songs that start 1 5 2 6, and it's like it keeps narrowing down. But there's almost always going to be multiple songs in any way that you start narrowing it. But on each one, you can also do one. I forget what the particular mode is called, but it's searching for, it might be the magic chord mode, or where it's trying to predict what would be next, and it'll tell you what percentage of songs went to this chord next. And like if you're in C major, for example, there's not a lot of songs that would go up to the B diminished, but that would be the appropriate chord in that key. But there's not a lot of chords that would do that, going from the
Yeah, you're talking the traditional B to C.
going to ending up at BDF,
This
which is actually
chord
half
does
diminished.
not
But
work well against the C.
yeah, it's technically in the key though, because
Yeah,
it's all notes that are in there, but it doesn't feel good.
yeah.
So not a lot of songs would do that.
It sounds so.
But it's technically a legitimate, it's on the list, let's say, so that there is some percentage of songs that go there because they want that
Well,
ugly sound,
if I
or
wanted that like dark,
you can even
I
keep
don't
that,
even know where to go from the B.
or even do it as a walk down from C to that B diminished to an A minor to a G major. Right.
But if you just do the B and the D by themselves, this is not bad. It's the F that really f's it up.
It's a foul. Throw a flag on the F.
And see, when I'm doing this and just doing the B and the D, to me, that's actually a G chord in first inversion. So if I was to do,
Because that's the 3 and the 5, sure.
that's really the chord that I'm playing there. That walks down really nice.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that's just a slight modification, but it takes the ugly part out of that particular chord.
It takes that F out and it holds the G, because on the first chord you got the C, E, G, and then when I drop down just the G stays, and it just kind of resonates a little bit longer. That's a progression I play with a lot.
And that's the thing, is with that B in there, is the one thing that what I was saying was hook theory, right? And if you go to that B, it's a very uncommon thing, but it would be on the list of legitimate places you could go. There's also all the borrowed chords that you could do, where, for example, if you were in the key of C, if you wanted to put in like sometimes, let's say you were doing a 2-5-1, you'd be doing a minor 2, right? And then a 5 would be a G, and then a 1 as a C. So a 2-5-1 is one of those things that you see a lot in jazz. You see it in a lot of different places, but it would be a minor 2 to a major or dominant 5, so, and then to a 1.
D, G, C.
Doing a D minor to G and then C, yeah. And it just feels very complete. And then from that 2, it's almost wistful, or has not a really sad sound. It is minor, but it's not really overbearingly sad, because you have that very solid 5 pulling towards that 1.
If anything, it makes the G feel happier coming from it.
Exactly.
The G feels like it's like saving the minor. And then dropping back to the C. Really, can't go wrong 5-1.
One substitution that some people will make is they'll make that 2 major instead of minor, and that's borrowing.
Doesn't sound bad as a major either.
And that's a slight alteration.
It doesn't have the same feel going to the G that way. I mean, the D major to a G major kind of feels like too many majors. The minor really leads it better.
Yeah. And the other thing is, the major 2 doesn't have to just go with the 5 and the 1. Is we could throw that in with anything else that we were throwing around. So if we were doing, let's say, the 6 and the 3 both as minors, so you're starting on the minor 6, so you're starting with an A minor and then an E minor, and then drop it to a D major and see what that sounds like. Kind of a soft landing, right? Like a happy landing after a sad beginning, even though it's just a quick little grabbing a couple chords and saying, what do these feel like? What do those feel like?
D minor. The D major actually sounds better. kind of holds it better.
Mm-hmm.
Although that D major is not part of that scale.
Yep. It would normally be D minor, but we can officially use it. But what we're doing there is we're actually borrowing. It's the 5 of the 5 chords. So if you look at the G, right, if you're starting in the C major, and you look at the 5 chord as G, G major, and the 5 of G major is that D with the F sharp. So that's where you're pulling it from, is we're borrowing, but we're borrowing from a legitimate place, which is the 5 of the 5. And it's pretty common. You don't use it all the time because there's a lot of times where the minor 2 sounds good, but this is one of the cases where the major 2 can be.
Oh, yeah, when you listen to a D major off of a G, these two go nice together.
It feels like it wants to go to the A minor, I think.
That's an A minor. That's unusual. Kind of dark, with a little bit of brightness in the middle. Kind of reminds me of the song.
Mm-hmm. It's got a nice feel.
Yeah, it works nice if you play it like play the chords out.
Yeah.
Thinking Wicked Games actually.
That's what I just heard there.
Yeah.
Not sure if that's exactly it, but I definitely hear that
it's a
in there
variation
somewhere.
on it, but it's close.
That's where root position feels like it jumps around too much. So I would definitely want to use the D in the position up there. So like, so it all stays right up in that top little area. So I'd be doing the G and then just down a little bit to the, just moving those 2 down to the A and the F sharp. And then, yeah, so that everybody's all in that neighborhood.
Oh, and that works. Starting in the root on the G and then going up to the D.
Actually, keeping the D as the top note, and then just moving for the G and the B come down to the F sharp and the A.
Yeah.
And then up to the A.
Making the D into that's first inversion, right?
Yep.
First inversion.
And that way, so that's one of that's an example of keeping it, making the A hit nice. But it's nice to keep them together like that, so that you don't have to jump around as much, and it makes it sound more cohesive. But you don't have to use the same ones all the time. You could go up one and then go jump down an octave and do a lower if you want, or different inversions to change how it feels. But it's nice to have the different options.
Yeah, I like this approach, starting with the G on the root. Now it really does feel like a slow, wicked game. Definitely stay on top of that.
And the other one would be to take that A, the last one, and put the A in second inversion, where you're playing E, A, C. So the first one would be the G. dropping down those two to the A and the F sharp, and then you're dropping down
So it would be.
all of them.
Oh, interesting.
That way the whole thing has that downward movement.
Oh wait, second inversion.
We went from G B D for the first one, and then F sharp A D, and then E G C. Or actually, wait, what was the third chord we were looking for? G. G. E. No, A. Sorry. We put the E on the bottom of the A chord is what I was doing, as that last one, instead of having the A all the way
E
up
would
there.
be the bottom.
Yeah. Because then our bottom note comes from the G to the F sharp to the E.
Yeah, that's easy to play too. I mean, very little movement.
And the important thing for me is to get comfortable with doing it each different way, because once you get your mind comfortable with bouncing back and forth between the inversions like that, it makes it so much easier in the future to be able to find them easily. Knowing about like taking the, from that G, knowing that if you drop those lowest two, you get that next, you get that D chord in the inverted form. It just makes it easy to keep that one note kind of pinned there, and then you're just dropping everybody by one to get to that A in the inverted form. Now, sometimes though, if you don't have a bass instrument or cello or something else holding down the bottom end, because that's usually where you would have that root note covered, and that's why a lot of times my buddy, the guitar player, would always play inverted chords, because he was never playing the root on the bottom, because he knew that there was always a bass player covering that root note all the time. So he would always have the third or the fifth on the bottom of what he was playing. But it also made it hard to follow what he was playing, because I'm watching his hand. What he was playing, but it also made it hard. Normally what it would normally look like. So instead of looking like a G chord, it would look like a C chord, because he's on the next string down. And I'd play a C chord, and I'd be like, wait, that's not the right chord, and I'm all over it, because he's using different inversions, which makes it weird.
Yeah, it's trickier when you guys are looking at each other. If you're doing inversions, huh? It doesn't look so
Depends
obvious.
if you I recognize the shapes better now, so it's a lot easier than it was at the time. At the time, it was just I saw what fret he was on, so I just assumed, okay, you're at that fret, and the lowest note or the lowest string you're hitting is this one, so I know that that's that note, so that's that chord. But it looked weird because it was not the right shape that I was expecting. But I was like, okay, so it's some alteration or what have you. But it was just a completely different inversion of a different chord. But I definitely, that was many years ago, so I've learned a lot about the chord inversions since then, so they all make a lot more sense. And actually, one of the things I was watching, Tomo Fujito is one of the instructors we've talked about a few times. He was John Mayer's guitar teacher. He taught at Berkeley for decades, and he's still putting out videos all the time. Just a lot of times it's just a little 2-minute or 3-minute video. You're showing you some aspect of something that he was going over with a student, and something clicked for the student. So it's something he put together into a video to put it out for everybody, which is the kind of thing I love, because those kinds of things are where I can know all the theory I want, but I might have missed this nugget or that nugget, or I learned it, but it didn't make sense at the time. But now that I learned some other things, it makes sense now.
Yeah, sometimes it takes time to click in some of those techniques.
Yeah.
There's some that I'm just clicking in 20 years later.
Exactly.
I've been soaking it up for decades.
And even like I might have seen something on a, I saw a chart sometime, again, decades ago, and it didn't make sense at the time, or it was just too much information at the time. But then all of a sudden that one little nugget jumps out at you. Same thing happens with the circle of fifths. Like there's a lot of things that you can glean from the information that's on the circle of fifths. Like just, you can jump to anything. Like if you're at C, you can jump a few around. So like C, G, D, A, E, you can jump from C to E and work your way back, and it would sound really good. So if you went from C to the E minor, or sorry, C, E, and you work your way back around the circle of fifths from the E back to the A, to the D, to the G.
See, and a lot of
Listen.
times with this, it's all about implementation.
Mhm.
Once you find a way to implement it into something in your music,
Mhm.
that's how it started clicking for me after you showed me. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I could write a song around this.
It's both writing a song and also what you're listening to. A lot of times, for me, the chord progressions was a big one. Where once I started hearing that 1 4 5, once you start hearing that, and like every time you hear that somewhere, you're like, oh, there's a 1 4 5. Or if you hear a variation, you hear a 1 6 4 5 is another common thing that you'll hear. And that's like different variations of that. Wagon Wheel is one of the songs that has that kind of a variation to it, where you're using the 1, the 5, the 6, and the 4, the minor 6, and the rest of them are all major. But it's usually you're jumping from the way I always look at it is kind of like you're working your way around the 5. So you're going from the 1 to just past the 5 with the 6, to just before the 5 with the 4, and then to the 5 in the middle. So you're going boom, 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 boom. You're working your way into the 5 and then back. The 5 always wants to come back to the 1. So knowing that you're always going to land from the 5 to the 1, you've got that other 6 and the 4 to work with. So you can either, you could go 1 to the 4 to the 6 to the 5, but it kind of sounds weird going from a 1 to a 4. Not bad. But I always think the 1 6 4 5 sounds better in that respect. And again, the different inversions make a difference too. So that was all just root position to feel the bounce of where they are
Well, the
relative to
bounce
each other.
feels higher, like a higher jump that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if we keep it all together with the 1 and the 6 and the 4 and the 5, so you're kind of working your way down like by twos almost. Because that
And
1,
that's a very typical progression. I mean, that's hundreds of songs
no,
across the
definitely.
last 100 years.
And again, that's because the from the first chord to the second chord, there's two notes are the same. So it's like it's these 2 notes with a G, and then these 2 notes with an A, and then you move it down. Or what we're doing, C, A minor, then F has the A and the C in there as well with the F, and then back up to the G. So the G is the only one that's introducing new notes, all at once, where the other ones are just kind of working their way down that way. Kind of cool. I like when stuff like that works out.
Yeah, I was just thinking, this video Ange sent me earlier, that she wanted me to show you here. Let me see if I can load up.
Load them on up.
And I did go and subscribe to this dude because he is a very good pianist.
Nice. Love it. Here he comes.
But this made me laugh because this is
How my parents think I play piano. How TikTok.
This is how I used to feel when I was playing piano at home, and I thought like the different people in the house heard things. So this is one of those YouTube shorts. You've probably been seeing a lot of those.
Yep, I've been seeing him come up a lot. I haven't really been checking him out though.
Yeah, well, YouTube's, trying to compete with TikTok, so there's a lot more of these shorts videos, and there's some pretty good ones.
Thinks I play piano. How pianists think I play piano. How the piano thinks I play piano.
This one cracked me up.
How I actually play piano. All right, time for a practice session. All right, that's enough for today. How my parents think I play piano.
See, that's
Yep.
How TikTok thinks I play piano. How
like
pianists think I play piano.
that's very Mozarty.
Yep.
How the piano thinks I play piano. How how I actually play piano. All right, time for a practice session. All right, that's enough for today.
See, and that's what a good short is
Oh,
for.
my parents.
Quick, very
2 seconds. Yeah.
entertaining,
Hmm.
shows off his skills.
Gets
Uh,
people interested in the channel. Sure.
yeah, that's Alex TV
Mhm.
over on YouTube.
Nice.
AYLEX.
Mhm.
Very cool way to spell it too.
Alex. Yeah, sure.
Alex.
Very cool.
But yeah, I can't wait to check out more of his piano work.
Hmm. We've been checking out some on Twitch lately too. We'll have to have a night where we take a look at a few of those as well.
Yeah,
Just
there
to look
are
at
a
and
lot
check
of talented artists
there's a
on
lot.
Twitch.
Yeah,
Twitch
definitely.
is no longer just a place for gamers.
Hmm.
After seeing like some of the ones you found, some of the ones Jason has found over there,
Hmm.
there's a lot of awesome singers, pianists, guitarists that are streaming all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely cool being able to do all kinds of stuff.
And it really shows like some of them shows off their skills, shows their endurance.
Yeah, some
That
of them
girl
stream for a
that
while.
that you showed me, I mean, she'll go for 2-3 hours nonstop.
Yeah, and bounce back and forth between instruments sometimes too. Like when she stepped over to the drums, like she just like on this side is the keyboard, and then like turn this way, and there's drums in the corner, and like the camera's right overhead. So, oh, switch to the drum cam. Put a little beat in, come back over here, and do some other things. That was very cool. Something that I need to do more of, but it's like these. They're not bad, but like I'm the pads they're very small little chiclet keys, so I have a difficult time trying to play those realistically or making them sound like realistic drums while hitting them. And sometimes they just feel too loud to me, but that's okay.
So you guys posting your links right now. Normally we don't take links, but I'm always curious and I'll take a listen if you guys are cool with natural review. So if you say in the chat that you're cool with that, I'll play those 2 tracks. And I'm gonna listen for arrangement and composition because that's what I like to listen to. So that's what I'm gonna be paying attention to. If you guys are cool with it, let me know. If you don't respond, I'm gonna assume that you just came in here to post your link and you don't stick around. Well, I will like and comment if you say it's cool that I can listen and
That's the trick.
make my comment here. I'm not going to go there and comment on the post. I'm going to play it and comment. You cool with that, ERD?
Drum roll, please.
Oh, and SR is checking to see what it sounds like beforehand.
Pre-screen it for you, sure. Now, what else would we do there? Like what we're doing right there was the jumping down, and you can do that. Jumping down by thirds like that is always fun. Like just staying in, like if we were staying in all the white keys again for this example, and just jumping up or down, where you just keep those same 2 keys, and then add one above them, going up by thirds each time. So you're going from the 1 to the 3 to the 5 to the 7. There's that diminished again. In that case, it's a minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished. But it's good to be able to jump by little bits of that. Right? What's up, Jason? Mr. Jacobs. And that's the strings. Have to find some horns as well. The old tuba. Always fun. Let's try one of the tempos here. Doesn't quite fit the style. Pop fusion. What about but that would be on the 8-beat. 8-beat number 1. Not sure I like the tuba sound too much though, so I think I'll switch that up. Full brass. It's not too bad. Little bit of brass.
Groovy.
That's the one of the 8-beat, right? 8-beat 1, I think it was. Yeah, 8-beat 1. It's not a bad. Keeps it simple. And it was just going back and forth between C and D minor.
Oh, I know those two chords. I know them well together.
And that's the thing, is just getting comfortable with what feels good together, whether it's the C and the D minor or get that E minor. Get all of them in there. Even borrowing from outside. That's the main thing, is once you like, you can think that you've already gone through everything with all the 1-4-5s and the 1-6-4-5s and all the different variations that you can do, but you can always borrow chords for things, and you can always just find new ways to do them and change in the middle.
I didn't realize how much I borrow chords until I started thinking about it.
Sure. And that's the thing, is that you're following your ear though. You know what sounds right. So when you're playing something, it's like, okay, here it is and it feels right. And you do that.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm trying to arrange a progression or chords, I'm not trying to think it out. I'm trying to flesh it out, hear it out, and
Yep.
where do I want it to go?
Mhm.
How do I want it to sound? And that's where the borrowed chords, sometimes it's like, wait a minute, I'm not in my key anymore, but it sounds good.
Yep. And that's one where you can, using that bend, you can actually, if you're playing a 1-4-5 in the key of C, for example, so there's that C and then the F and the G. Once you're in that F, you just bring that bend to go up to the G. But when you let go with this one, it's not a bend wheel, it's the button. So like, once I'm at the top of that bend, my only choice is to let go of the button and have it come down, or let go of the key first and have it just die at the top. But I can bend down from the G to the F if I wanted to do it that way. But the bends are fun. And again, staying in a key, starting with your simplest key, or if you're uncomfortable with keys that have sharps and flats, starting to add them or introduce them gradually. If you're not comfortable with either, just start gradually going around the circle of fifths to the right. So you're adding one sharp at a time. So you got that dealing with that F sharp and then key of G first, and then the next time you have to add the C sharp when you're in the key of D. And as you keep adding, you go around the circle, keep adding another sharp, and feel how it feels to get the chords in there, going through all the different chords. If you're
Well,
in the key of
you gotta get comfortable with those scales. Like you gotta practice your scales to get comfortable with them.
yeah, and it can be boring, but what I like to do is, again, like starting with the C as an example, just starting with all the white notes, just running through the scale once to get it in my ear, which all the right notes are, and then going up through each of those chords, right? So
And you gotta want to, because my natural inclination, if I'm trying to play something, the nice thing about trying the different scales is you hear different textures. Like this,
yep,
so each scale has a different
tension.
mood to it,
Mhm.
and getting used to each scale, you realize like, whoa, this progression sounds totally fuller or darker depending on which scale you use.
Absolutely.
But if the scale is hard to play,
Mhm.
my natural inclination is to go back to a, C major, something that I know I can play everything in.
Yep.
And
See, I'll also do that, but I won't stay in the C major. Like I'll come back to the C major to get how they feel relative to each other and to get the right chords in my ear, so I'm not accidentally hitting a sharp here or a flat there where I shouldn't be,
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do
and then go
now.
back. Yeah.
Like the what would Glenn do approach is like, okay, let's go get comfortable with it and let's go back to
Yep.
B
Because you're getting
flat
comfortable with how it
major.
sounds. It doesn't really matter what key it's in. You're listening for the intervals and you're listening to how they sound relative to each other. So like when we do that 1 6 4 5, we know from the usual theory that it should be the 1 major, 6 minor, and the 4 and 5 major, but they don't have to be. Like you could easily be in a different mode where your 1 is major, but there's some other configuration of the others because you're not actually on the 1. You're playing in 1 mixolydian instead of playing 1 ionian. So you can be in a totally different configuration, and going through some of those sounds really cool too, because if you're playing in mixolydian, that's one of those that um, Jerry Garcia, for example, a lot of his solos feel like most comfortable in mixolydian. Like you can feel some of those lines, some of those pull-offs that he does feel right in the top of the mixolydian mode.
That's the hippie sound.
And there's definitely some hippie sound in there, and that's one of those that it's distinctive. And as you're as you start playing more in mixolydian mode, you'll feel it more of what he's doing, because you hear where okay, now he's going really high. You don't have to know exactly what note it is, but if you know already, you can feel what key it's in. Yeah, Kiefer, what's happening?
Hey, Griever.
You manage to get yourself all the way up to that spot, and then all of a sudden the scale feels right. Like a lot of times I'll use on the guitar, I'll do that. The top of the minor pentatonic scale is, I would call it like a 1 4 1 4. It's the two strings in the same notes on both strings, and it's like a little bit of a stretch. You're using the first finger and the fourth finger, not the two in the middle. So if you're doing a 1 4 1 4 there, if you find where that is as you're playing along, as you're listening to something, if you just play like you find a note that feels right, and you just find which notes feel right for that 1 4 1 4, and you can build a scale around that because you know the different modes from working through the pentatonics. You know where that fits into each of those 5 positions, and how you can then build the scale from there. You don't have to always
So
use
that'd be
those
like a
positions, but
CF.
it would be going actually from, let's say, if you were playing an A minor pentatonic, you're doing that A and the C, and also the when you get to the top of it, like you're going around. I'm thinking about guitar, so the top would be the same A and C on the top string, but then below that would be I think the E and the G. So like the E and the G are 3 apart, and the A and the C are 3 apart. Three half steps is the way I'm looking at it. So like the 1 4 1 4 refers to the guitar, the way it would look if I was doing 1 and 4, like these frets, like the 5th fret and the 8th fret in this case. So it would be 5 8 5 8 on the top 2 skinniest strings. You can't really hear it because it's not plugged in right now. I guess you can a little bit.
Again. We don't need power.
Exactly. So that's just the top of the A minor pentatonic. But knowing if you're playing a scale somewhere and you can find those notes, In that case, that was a C, A, G, E. So it's not as useful probably on the keyboard, but for the guitar, once I find those, I don't have to slide around anymore. I know I'm in that mode or that scale, or I can just start playing a pentatonic built around that, and I know it works for the key that I'm in, because there's only one place in the scale that has that configuration of the 1-4, 1-4 right next to each other. And you'll see it in each of the different modes in a different place. And once you get comfortable with where those are, you can use as an anchor point or as a landmark, so to speak. But the main thing about that minor pentatonic that's always good is always being able to find that minor pentatonic
A
home
sonic
position.
calibration.
Yeah, but they'll call it the pentatonic equator, because just in that same A minor pentatonic example, all of these notes are in A minor pentatonic. Every single one of them on that line that I'm covering right there, the 5th fret. So every single one, so it's like 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. But all of them have a 5. So like that's the equator. So you can use that and you play the minor pentatonic.
So you really can't go wrong.
So you really can't go wrong. Like if you can find where that is, and again, that little 8585 is where I found, like if I found that those 4 notes all fit in what I'm doing, then I know that this works, and I know I can do that whole thing where I can just keep that 5. But you can also do other things built around that. But also knowing where that equator is, you can also go behind it, where you're holding that equator with your pinky, not holding, but using all the notes there and doing the shape behind it. And then that 1-4, 1-4 is in the middle on those middle 2 strings. So like that's where if I find it where I'm playing wherever and I find it's in the middle 2 strings, I know I'm in that position. So it's just another one of the ways of figuring out. And that might not be very clear, but just trying to, I guess it's like a part of why the pentatonics are something that's so important for people to look into.
Yeah, and not just for guitarists, as I'm noticing.
Yeah,
hey,
exactly.
Pan, good to see you.
What's happening? Yeah, it's important for the sound.
Well, I never really thought a lot about these modes. As a keyboardist, I mean, I might have been doing them without realizing it, but trying to understand guitarists' techniques and their approach, like the last couple of years, really opened my eyes to the importance of modes. These modes are how guitarists are able to just solo all over the place.
Yep. And the pentatonics especially, because even just finding, when we play something, as soon as I can find a pentatonic that fits, I can just sit there and go up and down. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the vocal lines that you would hear, a lot of the melody lines that you would hear most strongly in the songs are based around, that pentatonic that I'm hearing. And that's why I'm hearing it. And that's why it comes out. And even if we hit like some just random, one of these guys, like different rhythm, and just trying to hit and see what they do with like a 16 beat. That's the beat itself, but then as soon as you tell it a key, so like let's say we're going to do it in A minor.
Feel the beat to the rhythm of the night.
This is what it does with an A minor. If you just tell it to do this one, and just keep that going around. For the bass here, it's very simple, just kind of repeating a little bit.
That's a pretty funky A minor. Austin Powers approved.
Working around that A minor chord, little G in there. But like I said, it's got that little funky feel to it. Then instead of the A minor, we jumped up to the D minor. Just kind of work back and forth between those two. I'm jumping up. I do get lost in that a lot of times, just because it's fun to just get that going and then just kind of jam along to it again with just, you could sit there with that little D minor thing going and just keep, working a pentatonic around it. change keys, you go from there to the A minor, and you start working in with that pentatonic and see how that feels. And you can see how it feels with each one, just either sticking to a particular particular scale or a particular mode. But again, just by grabbing a pentatonic and just kind of feeling it out, gets you so much mileage, because you can just start bouncing around with something like that. And if you wanted to be further up the keyboard, you could just run that pentatonic all the way up and
That
just get to
Casio's got a nice muted guitar patch.
yeah, I like that. And that's part
Oh,
of the
Angelo asked a good question here. As will I get in trouble for copywriting MIDI files?
there you go.
MIDI files, typically, the ones you find out on Google and on the internet, those are free use files. As long as you're not making money off of those MIDI files, they typically are open source to the public. The reason why MIDI doesn't have the same problems as actual audio recordings is you have to produce MIDI through a synthesizer. You don't have an original recording. You take the actual notes, you it plays them on a synthesizer. This is now a new recording of the song. It doesn't mean you get a license to the song, but you get a open license to use the MIDI file to recreate the song, to practice,
Because it's your instrument playing
to
the music.
yeah, because you're not using an actual studio recording. Copyright tends to be on the recordings and the song license.
And that's also
So
where you get that certain few seconds that you could do if you were sampling something, or if you were using something that's very similar but only for like 2 seconds worth. That's one thing. And it's not to intentionally try to steal anything, but it's just if your song happens to be similar to somebody else's song in this minor way, it's fine. But if it's too similar, then it's
yeah, and
down
nobody's
the
going to
road.
come sue you if you're just using it to practice, or for free, you're not making any money. But one thing I would recommend is stay away from those stripping apps that will take an original recording and remove vocals or
Yep.
separate. They've gotten amazing these days. The AI can really separate tracks, but at the same time, you are using an original recording that was produced in a studio and sold on an album. If you take that track, sing on top of it, and put it up on YouTube, you can be sure you're going to get told that the tracks you're using there, these are copywritten tracks. And sometimes they might actually say you can't post it at all. Other
Right.
times they'll say you can post it, but the artist is actually the one who's going to get paid for the ads. You won't make any money on YouTube if you're using tracks like that.
Now, for me, the point of the app like that, because we did go over that in one of our shows, at least we went over at least one of those apps. Could have been
Yeah,
two or
those are
three.
useful
And
apps.
I
I
just found
mean,
another one just recently. But for me, the proper usage, the way I would use it would be to, if I'm going to have it separate things out like that or strip parts out, I'm stripping out the vocals so that I can hear the instruments better, to be able to separate the parts out better in my ear. And I would be using the parts to intend to replace all of them. Like, I'm not
yes,
intending to use any pieces of what's there, but I wanted to use them as a guide track so like I could
or
hear what
to
the bass
learn
is
them,
doing, to learn it exactly.
or to
I
learn them,
can I can
or
put that bass part on, play along to it, and then once I've got it down solidly enough, I can take that part out, just have my bass part in there, and then do the same thing with the guitar part, do the same thing with the keyboard part, do
I'll
the same
give
thing
you
with the
even
vocal
one
parts.
better where it's useful. If you can separate those tracks nice and clean,
Mhm,
you can now take that separated track, run it through Melodyne.
mhm,
Melodyne converts audio to MIDI.
mhm.
So if Melodyne's doing its job properly and it has a nice, clean guitar track or bass track, nothing too super complicated. I mean, Melodyne does amazing things, but it can't interpret like complex arrangements.
Mhm.
You can take those separated tracks, reinterpret them through Melodyne. You now have MIDI.
Mhm.
Run that MIDI through your own synthesizers, and you are not using original studio tracks anymore.
And
You
that'd be a
are
good way to get the songs that you were talking about that some people are interested in doing, but you can't find a MIDI file for. Because most things you can find a MIDI file for, but some are either too complicated or nobody bothered or whatever. There's different reasons why there might not be a MIDI file readily available for a song. But using that method, you could now make your own MIDI files from just about anything by splitting the song up. The other thing that I was just thinking with splitting the song up or having it separate the layers like that is that you can now run each of those layers through your own effects. And you can actually remix the song as if you were now, as if you were in charge of the studio mix. So now you can make the bass louder, you can make the guitars lower, you can put different effects on things, you can have your own unique mix, and it gives you good practice in working with solid signals and things like that because there's a good solid, it's a studio track, so you know how everything is going to be well represented in the mix and all that. So it can give you a good way of looking through that kind of stuff too.
Here, let me show you this.
Mhm.
When it comes to looking for MIDI files, something that I have done a lot, um, you can find a lot of garbage out there. Wrong screen. Hold on.
That's a key picture too, though.
Oh, I love my Ange logo. Okay, there we go. So here I'm just doing a simple Google search for MIDI files, and these sites that you're going to see here, uh, I can vouch for some of them. They're nice, clean. They have massive libraries of open source, freely available MIDI files. They don't charge for them. Um, if you're going to go hunting for MIDI, typically I will put in like a song name and then the word MIDI. And within the first page or two, you're going to see a lot of these sites with that song. And you can trust BitMIDI, awesome library, all free. And MIDI World is another good one. A lot of these other ones aren't. Freemidi.org, another great library.
It also depends if you're looking for a particular song. Like if you're looking for such and such a song MIDI file, it might direct you just to the ones that would have that particular one. But a lot of these, like you say, have huge libraries, so they probably all have most of the songs that you would be
Yeah,
interested in
and the
looking for.
reason why I tend to search with the song title and the word MIDI versus like going to these sites directly is it's whatever site happens to have the song. And once in a while, you will find different versions of MIDI files for the same song. You should grab them all because not all MIDI files are created equal. Some are really well programmed and others are just pure garbage. And if you are going to pay, because I've only paid 3 different sites for MIDI files because I needed a song that I could not find for free, or I needed a better version of a song. Um, Hit Tracks is one of them. I actually, for a while, was buying blocks. The way he sells his, you can buy a MIDI file individually, or you can buy like a 5 song block or a 10 song where you can pick 10 MIDI files from his library. I
Right.
actually bought the 15 song chunk twice before I finally was like, I'm spending 60-70 bucks for 15 songs. um I only do that over here when I've used them all up and there's a track that I absolutely need. But I can say every MIDI file from this site, quality, it's all made custom from them and they know how to program a MIDI file beautifully.
Now, as
Uh,
far as which ones you would grab, do you necessarily gravitate to the ones that are more complicated? Because like some songs, if it's like a song that's just three, like a guitar, a keyboard, drums, and a bass,
with
that's
this
not
site,
bad. But if there's
with
a
this
lot of
site, it's
parts,
only the ones that I can't find elsewhere. If I only got 15 slots that I paid for, the
mhm.
only songs I'm going to grab from here are ones I can't find elsewhere. Because if I can find it elsewhere, I'd rather keep that slot open for a song that I can't find elsewhere. They do have a few tracks, at least a couple of hundred, that you will not find on any other site. Like they went and got. And what I do like about them, when you look at how they deal with things, they really do. take care of licensing. This is where when you buy these tracks, it actually does come with some licensing tied to it. I think they it looks like
Nice.
he changed his site, but um, he is very license proactive. So every track that you get from them is licensed directly from the artists, and they have been licensed to make these MIDI files. And when you buy them here, you are getting a license to be able to use that MIDI for your performances. Like if your band's playing out and you use these MIDI files for your live performances, you're not going to get in trouble with these. The license comes with the performing usage. You can't go and put that song on an album and sell the album because you have to get a song license at that point from the artist, but you can use that MIDI to perform on stage. So it's an interesting license arrangement that you get with these guys. The MIDI site that I still like, I bought a lifetime subscription to this site. Actually paid monthly for over a year, was paying, 15 bucks a month. But the beauty of the way the pricing is for access to the library. So if you do pay monthly, you basically can get access to all the MIDI files they have. And this is the biggest MIDI library um, on the internet. If you're going to pay for one site,
Mhm.
this is the best MIDI library that you can actually have at your arsenal. And the fact that he has a lifetime subscription option. Once I did it for a year, I was like, son of a bitch, if I do it for another year, I've already paid for a lifetime subscription after 2 years of paying per month. So I finally bit the bullet,
Mhm.
paid another $150, and now I have a lifetime access. It's a beautiful complement to my own MIDI library.
Yeah.
I have a massive MIDI library on my hard drive,
Mhm.
but this is like a secondary backup. And every once in a while, I find songs here where, um,
It's either a better version or one that you couldn't find somewhere else. And this is
yeah,
20,132 files. Damn.
and they keep on the ball. They are constantly, they make like 50 to 100 new midis a week. So that new song that just came out, eventually a lot of them end up in this library.
How much tweaking do you have to usually end up doing for a song that you would pull from here? Let's say if you consider it a high quality MIDI from here, how much
From
how much
from
effort do you
here
need to still put into it from
from
the here?
here I don't typically have to do a lot of tweaking. The ones that I get online just willy-nilly,
Yeah,
once in a while you'll get a MIDI file where, oh, the piano track sounds awesome, the bass track sounds awesome, and the guitar sounds like shit. Or the drum, sometimes you end up wanting to fine tune.
yeah,
But
I could definitely see the drums for sure. That's one that can if the drums aren't right, it's like yeah, it was like so close, but no. Definitely need some good realistic drums.
yeah, and fortunately, tweaking a MIDI file, it does help you to really like get into the track itself and learn the parts. And it's not a hard thing to do. MIDI is really easy to deal with once you understand, once you grasp what MIDI is. I think a lot of people shy away from it because they think it's something technical, and really MIDI is just the modern version of sheet music.
I think they
Uh,
think of it as if you have to type in like hit the E for this long and then do this, like you have to actually program in note by note or whatever. But to me, I just always looked at it as this is the modern version of the piano
no,
roll for the player
t-
piano, where it's
typical
just
MIDI programmers don't punch in their MIDI. These guys making these MIDIs, they're not sitting there punching in the track. They're playing the track on
right.
a keyboard, or in some cases a MIDI guitar. Because
Mhm.
when you hear really good guitar tracks in
Yeah,
MIDI,
yeah.
it's programmed by a guy who actually picked up a MIDI, or used a real guitar and translated the effect into MIDI.
Same
Here,
thing for horns, but or flutes and things. But the other thing is having a realistic bend.
Yeah.
makes such a difference.
And you know, that's a technique in guitar that's very important. And when you're trying to make that guitar track for the MIDI file,
Mhm.
if you don't incorporate that bend for that song, then that song doesn't sound like the song it's supposed to because the
It's trying to
guitarist
slide it
bends.
instead.
So here I've got like my Doors MIDI file folder, and
Nice.
I'm just gonna bring up Light My Fire.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is another interesting thing for people to know. If you do get Cakewalk from BandLab, it comes with a pretty good general MIDI synthesizer right out of the box. Like you don't need to go get a synthesizer. The DAW comes with a great starting one. So I just loaded this MIDI file and loaded it into Cakewalk. And if you look here, you'll notice these tracks, and it's not uncommon in MIDI that you might have an empty track. So this track one is really nothing. I'm just going to delete it because it's blank. But all these other tracks are different instruments. And if you look down here at the bottom, this last track, this is not a MIDI track. This is a soft synth. And all the sounds you're going to hear here are coming through this soft synthesizer. It's a synthesizer called TTS, and it's the one that comes with Cakewalk. And if I click this little icon here, come on.
Gotta get that drum roll. There it goes.
Oh, this icon. If I click this little icon, this brings up the TTS. And, you know, this is the synthesizer. Like any MIDI synthesizer, it has 16 channels. All MIDI has 16 individual channels, and those channels allow different parts to do their thing through that channel. So, like anything going on channel one right now would be going to piano. If you look sideways here, you see the instruments are set up out of the box, they all default to piano, like the first sound in the engine. But because this MIDI file is general MIDI, all MIDI files that you download out there are going to follow the general MIDI standard. General MIDI standard says there is 128 sounds that are the core sounds in all music. A couple pianos, a couple different types of guitars, brasses, strings. When you look at all the general MIDI sounds, there's a reason why they're in that library to fill the different types of instruments used. So when I hit play here, if you watch those patches down there, those they're going to change to actual instruments for each part. So all of a sudden, there's our organ.
Nice.
And if I don't like that organ, I can always go in and say, I want this organ. That's the beauty with MIDI. And it's the main reason why I like to keep everything in MIDI tracks, because sometimes I might use two or three organs blended together to get a sound.
That's awesome. I really like the way that one sounds too. It's got like more, not a honk in a bad way, but more of a honk to the organ than the other one did a little bit.
Yeah, this one almost feels like a church organ, or it's got a nice kind of
Without the extra
breath to
tail
it.
on the end. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, with MIDI, we're not producing sound on these tracks. Let's take a look at this organ track. We zoom in on this. That's not a wave. You know, MIDI does not make sound. And I think that's the biggest misconception that a
Actually,
lot of people have.
the MIDI edit might be even better because that shows the piano roll on the side, right?
Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the event list. This this is why I can't use MIDI in the BandLab editor, because the BandLab editor does not let me go look at my MIDI track the way I'm about to show you. It's nice for just laying down a simple track. You can sequence in the BandLab editor, but when you really want to get into the MIDI events, uh, this is where you want to go in something like Cakewalk, the event list. So if I bring this up a little and you take a look here, this is what MIDI really looks like. There's no sound. It is a time, 15 seconds in, hit a B6 for 250 milliseconds. That's what this one event is doing.
And the 74 is the how hard you're hitting it, right?
Yeah, the 74 is
Velocity.
velocity level. Matter of fact, in some of these categories, you'll see things change sometimes. Like this 74 could be different MIDI events. In this case, it is velocity. But you could see this category change from 74 to other numbers depending on like what MIDI event you're trying to do. If it was a guitar track and you're trying to do a bend or something like that, you'd be using different MIDI events. 64, for instance, one that I use all the time, sustain. So you want sustain. If I wanted to sustain this organ, which why would you? But if I wanted to sustain this, say this was a piano track, um, I just duplicated this event and I change it from a note event because a note event is what exactly what it's called. It's you need to define a note for a note event. If I change it to a controller event and I change this to 64, then the key to me getting sustain is whether I'm above or below 63. Um, the events go from 0 to 127. And in the case of sustain, anything from 63 or lower is sustain off. 64 or higher is sustain on. So if I said 127 here, then I'm saying turn on the sustain. If I say 0 here, then I'm turning off the sustain at this point in the song. So if this was a piano track and I wanted to start with some sustain, I would set it to 65 or higher. There really is no difference between this or 127. Anything
The one
above
difference is that
64 is on.
the one
Anything
difference between
below
64 and
is off.
127 is your leg gets more tired holding the pedal at
Yeah.
127 because you're hitting it harder. That's the only difference.
Well, with this particular control event, the sustain pedal is kind of an on-off thing. So like really 63 is the
They
same as
give you
0
they
and
give you half of the range.
65 is the same as 127. If
Half of the
this
range
was
for
an
the snap.
expression pedal, it wouldn't be 64 at that point. But if I was using expression, there is a difference between 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 127. That pedal really changes all that.
And that gives you that amount of granularity over the volume when you are pushing that pedal. Because if you are going wah 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 with that pedal, you really are sweeping through a range of volume settings.
And Pan, I could do a sustained organ, but you have to strategically write your part if you're going to sustain the organ.
Mhm. Yep, definitely depends on the instrument. This keyboard has a sustain option, but I don't have a pedal for it. But I have the piano here where I do have the sustain pedal, but I just don't have that one hooked up the same way for the output. Like this one, I can hook up and have the audio output directly, as well as have it go through Meticulous. Where if I go through the other one, I'm only getting the Meticulous, and there's a little bit of a delay when I play through the Meticulous, so it's a little annoying
Yeah, and you have
for
the
me to hear it
extra
on my head.
option with Meticulous. You could literally click the sustain button on, like, you can trigger these events just by clicking the things on the screen, the virtual keyboard,
Using my mouse.
which you also have here. Like right now, we're looking at this as the event editor.
Mm-hmm.
Just to show you like MIDI. Like when you really look at MIDI, and we're zooming in now. You know, this is not audio, so The moment you realize like MIDI is not audio, it just represents what audio is going to do with an instrument, MIDI starts to get a lot easier. People who say, oh, MIDI sounds like shit, that's kind of a stupid statement because MIDI doesn't sound like anything. What makes this MIDI sound like something is this synthesizer that I'm sending that MIDI to. So, this channel 2 here that's playing this organ, and the organ that I use dictates how this MIDI will sound. A better organ and a better sampler, you get different results. Like we're playing organ 5 here, or organ 3 right now. If I change to a piano, and sure, it can sound like shit, but it's not because the MIDI sounds like shit. It's because the synth and the instrument that you're choosing. Detuned organ.
Nice. I was gonna say clav.
That actually works
Yeah,
good
that works
for,
real nice. Yeah.
yeah, for that organ part. But one thing you're going to notice every time I restart the track, it goes back to organ 3. And there's a reason for that. Um, the reason why that's going back to organ 3 every time I start over is because I can't set the sound over in the TTS. The TTS is a MIDI synthesizer. It gets told what sound you want to load and what notes you want to play. But if it's programmed in the track, if you go look here on the left here, um, this track, the patch here, these 3 categories decides what synthesizer I'm going to. So I am going to the Cakewalk TTS. If I wanted to go to my Roland, I would change the synthesizer. But this last category, this is where the sound actually gets set for the track. So if I didn't want to load organ 3, I wanted organ 5 every single time, then I would have to change this preset from 18 to whichever the preset number organ 5 is. And because the TTS, like in this format, doesn't show you the names, you'd have to go look and see what is organ 5. Organ 5 is 18, not 19. So here, and this can be a little confusing, you see 18 here, but because the bank starts at 0, 18 here is technically 19 to the synthesizer.
I love when
So
they do that.
the patch it's loading is actually the 19th patch in TTS. Organ 5 is actually 18. So if I change this to 17, now every time I go to start this track, it's loading a different organ. And that allows me to set my instruments at the track level.
Mhm. That's also
Whereas,
why you need those extra couple seconds at the beginning for everything to initialize and all of that. That's part of what's going on.
yeah, that's a very good point. And anytime you're downloading MIDIs on the internet, you'll notice a lot of times they start at 0, and you don't want, even if you're not doing MIDI, if you're just doing audio, always have a count in. Never start the song at 0 because things need to initialize, not just synthesizers, but microphones, anything that needs to kick in shouldn't kick in right at 0 on a recording. It's just bad practice. So if I didn't want to start at 0 here, like this one is doing, what I do every time I start a project, I go up here and I select all, and I go under project, and there's an option to insert time measure. And if you go here and you say, give me 1 measure, that's all I technically need. 1 measure count in before the music starts. So hit OK, boom. Now the project starts 1 measure in, and That's what you should do right at the beginning if you're going to work with these MIDI files. Don't go and do all sorts of shit and then say, I'm going to add the one measure later. Once you start adding audio tracks and things, this whole jump gets a little more complicated. Do it at the beginning. Same way you set your BPMs. These are things you do at the start of a project, not after.
Yeah. And it makes sense. And that's the other thing is that you can, when you're exporting the track later, you can always export from here to there. You can always cut that part out later if you
Yeah,
need to. I mean, there's a
exactly.
number of ways you can get around it later if
It,
you need to.
if you want to shorten up the beginning for the final, once I've, let's say I bounce all these tracks, which I'll show you in a second, how easy it is to do with a soft synthesizer. um, Once you're done putting all the music together and you've got your master file that you're going to send to BandLab, that's the track that you can go snip at the beginning and shorten it. You don't want to be snipping at the beginning in projects ever. Like, it's easy to cut from the end on an audio track. Nothing changes in the timeline when you cut at the end. When you cut at the beginning, you are changing the entire timeline of everything afterwards.
And
So
I don't want to get you on a soapbox, but you also talk
you
about
should
changing the
never do
key or
that.
changing the key and changing the tempo in a
Yeah,
project.
and you know why that's such an issue with me is because it's so easy to do on BandLab. BandLab, a lot of people don't realize it; they just do it. Uh, BandLab, you can go set the key. If you get one of my tracks and you notice it's set to E minor, and you change it from E minor to something else. I've had users do this, and I didn't realize it at first. The way I ended up discovering this was a problem is I had a guy who was trying to do an Elton John song, and he kept down tuning my E minor to D,
Yeah.
and he's basically bringing the whole track down, you know, 4 half steps. Um, the way that BandLab transposes like that, it's an audio file. Audio files don't transpose like that. What happens when you transpose an audio file using BandLab is it stretches or shrinks the audio file to change the pitch.
Now
So
it will
it
ask you
did
about that.
bring it from E to B, but it changed the entire time of the whole track, almost like 15 seconds across the whole track.
It will ask you
He
though when you do it, like when you change it, because I could see a situation where somebody like it's set for E, and let's say, and it's not in E. Now that's a situation that you're not talking about. But like let's say that whoever started the project had it set for E, but the song is actually in B.
Yeah, if you want to
So
correct the
so somebody
key,
wants to change it, but it'll ask you, do you want to make adjustments to the existing sections? And you just say
say
no.
no. Say
But
no,
at the
and
same
you
time,
just
do you
set
want to
the
trust that is
key.
the question.
Well, yes, never do the adjustment unless you want that adjustment. If you're changing the BPM and you are like, sure, you want this BPM to actually change the audio that you're hearing, you want to hear it go faster or slower, then yes, you want to say yes to the adjustment. Otherwise, changing it from 120 to 100 and saying no there doesn't actually change the audio.
At
It
the same
just
time,
changes the stamp.
I could see a situation where somebody would say it's in 120 and you want to hear the metronome at 240. So you
Mm,
could change it to 240 and
double
say,
time.
do you want to change the existing sections? And you say, you don't say that. You say no, and then you can just listen to it at 240, and it leaves those other sections without adjusting them. So those sections are still fine, but now your metronome is going at 240
See,
with
and
two
that's
records in
another
it. Yeah.
thing, with MIDI, these kinds of changes in MIDI, very common. The whole reason why it's cool to work in MIDI, if I transpose, if I say I don't want to be in E minor, I want to be in B minor, MIDI will true transposition. It will take the notes that are supposed to play at E and it will play them at B minor, and it will transpose. Exactly, it'll sound clean, and there will be no time change. Like the same, for instance, this is 3 minutes and 11 seconds. the entire song. If I was to change the key, if was to go to the meter key here and say I don't want it to be in C, I want it to be in G major. All it did is retranspose all the events so that instead of playing a C major chord, it plays a G major chord. But the timing of the entire song is still 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Nothing changes other than now we're playing in a different scale.
Right.
When you're dealing with waves, transposition is not the same thing. Wave audio does not transpose
Now,
elegantly.
now that's one thing is you could do the adjustment like we were saying if it was set for E and you wanted to change it to F or whatever. If you were changing, a close range, a key that's nearby, you could, if you make that adjustment and you tell it to adjust it, like you're saying, it's going to crunch it down or stretch it depending on what you're trying to do.
Well,
But if
if
you
I go
go,
here to the BPM
Mhm.
and I say, oh, this song is too fast,
Right,
I want it at 100 BPM, which is really going to make this sound kind of funky.
laid back,
But as you can hear, it's clean. Like it's playing at 100.
and it's in the original key,
It's
and it's in the
playing
original
at
key.
100 and it's in the original key. It's playing at 100. The pitch doesn't change. The only thing that changed there is the tempo. Oh, too slow. I don't want it at 121. Like you said, I want to double it. 121
Two 42.
242.
Yeah, that's gonna be
Now,
fast.
now this should be
This is after you had a
interesting.
lot of coffee. After Jason's fourth Red Bull.
Yeah, that's Super Mario style.
A little too fast.
But you see how clean all the instruments. The drums still sound like the same drums. The organ still sounds like the same organ. It's just playing faster.
Yep.
If I did this to the audio version, say on BandLab that I put up, and I did the same thing over there to the wave file, all those instruments, you'd hear an effect on their sound because the way that audio time shifting happens is by stretching or compressing the wave.
Now, sometimes though, that is something that you might want. Where if, for
Oh, it
example,
can be
if
useful.
if
Yeah.
we take that example where we had somebody who wanted to sing it, but they wanted to sing it, two half steps lower. They instead of playing it in E, they wanted to play it in D or whatever. They could take the one track. I'm not talking about like one where we have 20 different tracks and everything's doing things differently. I'm talking about we have like one music background track, right? You can take that track, do the edit, and tell it in there, stretch it by two semitones. You tell it to go down two semitones, and it'll take it, and it will change the length, like you said, but that would change the length, let you sing along to it at that length, and then you could take yours and shift it back up, and it would be messy, but you'd be able to see what it would sound like with your voice being able to do
Yeah.
it back up at that level,
Yeah,
so
it's a
that
good
you'd be
way to
able to
feel it
hear it.
out. And that's one of the most common situations when you do need to transpose. Probably the biggest reason is because you got a singer who sings better, a little lower or a little higher, and you just transpose to get into the singer's pocket.
Mhm.
Or like if you've got a brass, a saxophone, they're typically tuned to B minor,
Mhm.
or is it B flat?
I
What
think
is
it's
it?
B flat major.
Yeah,
I
B
think B
flat
flat
major.
concert
That
B flat.
sounds right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, sometimes you will actually tune to an instrument, and a voice is one of the most common ones why people will transpose.
Mhm. Yep. In
And
other cases, it would be
once
for
in a
specific
while, you'll get
instruments, like
that
you said.
you'll get that singer who insists, like, I I really sound great in this key. Can you put it in that key? I've
Right.
had that.
Sure. And then the other one would be, for example, somebody brought, six harmonicas because harmonicas they're
Yeah.
they're in a particular key, right? So like you have the common, let's say the common five or seven or whatever harmonicas that you would have, and if a song they want to do a song that's not in one of those keys, they might be like, if you bring it up a half step, I can play with this harmonica, but if you leave it where it is, I've got nothing, like there could be a situation where they're stuck like that. So that
I'll
would be
tell
another
you,
one
those
to think
harmonica
about.
players, the ones who are do go and buy like a suitcase full of them,
A whole
they're
bandolier
committed.
like
Yeah,
across. It's just like grab this one or that one. I've
yeah.
seen them on the
It's
mic
one
stands
thing to
also.
have like one harmonica to jam on, but it's another thing to be like Ange's friend who's got like every key.
Oh yeah. Well, to be honest, like when I got my harmonicas, I got a starter set, and it was just a set, and they were cheap. That was like the it's like 30, 40 bucks, whatever, for the whole set, and it was a set of, I think it was seven, like the seven most
Oh,
common
nice.
keys that you would have. But if you think about that circle of fifths, I mean, there's a lot of keys, right? So
Yeah.
so seven isn't covering everything. So it's they're hitting everything. I think they started at B flat and went around to the other side. So like B flat, F, C, and going around the circle of fifths the other side there. But you were leaving out all the other flat keys on the other side, as well as just other keys that are out there. But at the same time, a lot of the songs that you would want to play that are harmonica songs or have harmonica parts in them would be in one of the more common
Yeah.
keys. But at the same time, it's to me, I was like, I just think of it as a limiting factor. Like if I'm looking at, if you're going to show me an instrument that's only able to play in the key of B flat or whatever, it's like I would much rather have an instrument that's diatonic. And I know that there are full diatonic harmonicas that are much more complicated or larger and have more going
Really?
on than a standard
I
one.
did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways. There's even ones that have like an additional like um, push button almost or slide kind of a thing on the side to change, like whether it's to flatten or to sharpen or whatever it is, or to change shift the whole thing
Like
over
a
slightly.
shift key?
It's almost like a shift key, but I don't know if it's for the whole set or if it's just for bending a specific note, like the note that you're hitting. Because most of the time with our harmonica, the way you're bending is by pulling more air. So like you're trying to go like and like pull more air in to make a note go from wah wah and make it go down. You do like that kind of a thing. You're actually pulling in extra air across it when you're pulling a note in. So you usually, I mean, you can overblow also, where you're trying to push extra air out. Those are two different ways of making the sound either go
Like
up
a
or
12
down.
string.
12 string, you're playing two strings at a time. And in that case, it's like,
The strings
there's
are
like
an
two,
octave higher.
yeah, they're usually an octave apart. So you're playing like two E's, two A's, two C's, like depending on what note you're hitting, or what fret you're hitting. Where with the harmonica, the diatonic harmonica versus the regular one, the first four notes are basically, let's say that's a C harmonica. Those are going to be the first four notes that you have. If you're blowing out, it's so that you can just blow out that low end of the harmonica, and you're always going to hear that C chord, that nice big fat C, E, G, C. But if you were to draw in, you would end up with the 5 chord, the 2, 5, 7, essentially. And then if you go to that, the next, because there's 10 holes in the harmonica, that was the low 4. If you go to those next ones, it's another C, E, G. So if you're blowing through a harmonica, you're getting that 1 chord at the low end and another octave higher on the next 4. And then like you're as you push versus pull air on the same hole, you'll go from to the C to the D, and then you push the next hole as an E, and then a pull is an F, and a push is a G, and a pull is an A. So it's like they go back and forth like that. But there are spots where it switches on you and it doesn't do what you think it'll do. But it's basically the same idea with guitar, as far as they made those decisions to make it easier to play chords, and you're trying to play the 1 chord. Essentially, if you're trying to think about the 1 chord, the 5 chord, and the 4 chord, that's what you're trying to get out of the harmonica as best you can. You're pushing and you're getting this chord, you're pulling and you're getting a different chord. If you push over here, you're getting this chord. If you pull over here, you get a different chord.
Now, is it possible for a harmonica player to induce a pitch with
Oh yeah.
their voice along
Yeah.
with the harmonica?
Kind of singing through it, you could, I suppose, because you are pushing and pulling air, and you could add a
And
vocal
if you
component to it, but I'm not
actually
sure how much
add
it would
a,
pick up with coming through. I mean, I can actually whistle and make sound at the same
I'm
time, so
kind of
that's one
curious
of
if
those that
there's been
sounds really
any
weird.
players, yeah, have there ever been any players who've incorporated that kind of technique where they pushed a note through the harmonica?
In the same way that you'll see certain piano players or guitar players, like Oscar Peterson is one good example. Oscar Peterson on the piano, you'll see him playing, and if there's a microphone in the room, you'll hear him like singing along to the part. He's just trying to like whatever he's trying to play, he's actually singing what he's
Yeah,
playing.
and that's not an uncommon situation. You got those guys that have like they're playing guitar, they're playing the harmonica at the same time, they're singing.
But trying to
Um,
sing while playing harmonica or push
yeah,
vocals
yeah,
while playing
it's
harmonica, that's a whole different thing, because I think a lot of it has to do with how the force of air that you're pushing versus pulling is also where you get those bends from. So if you needed to get this note that you're pulling to bend down, you're pulling and you're pulling extra hard to make it raw to bend down. It's kind of hard to describe. It's easier like when you actually have a harmonica, but like I lost that whole set that I got for $30. I lost those. Those were in the trunk of the car that floated away.
Is that kind of like the same thing as when like the brass guys do those spits, this kind of sound?
That could be a couple different things. Like with some of the brass, like you'll see them clear that one valve. Like you'll see them just reach over and like hit a button on the side of like a trumpet or a trombone. That's the spit valve essentially. Like just
Oh,
humidity. They
that's
call
how
it
they
that, but
get that
it's not really
sound?
what it is. But no, that sometimes gets built up in there. So like sometimes it's just humidity inside there from them blowing through it. It'll build up humidity inside, so you have to
Man,
drain it out.
that's got to spit out a
But
little mess after a while.
the main thing though is that for that little spit sound is probably more in the lips actually, like the way that they have them pursed, the way that they're trying to push through. If they're trying to push extra hard and some is like seeping out the sides of the mouthpiece, like that might be where it's coming from. It's hard to say, but my guess would be it's out the sides of the mouthpiece. Like you have the mouthpiece over the middle, and if you're pushing really hard, like whatever, like some of the air is going to squeeze out the sides.
See, from how it sounds, I thought they're like pursing their lips, like
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah, that's
pinching
part
their
of,
lips.
and it depends which of the instruments we're talking about. Like in a
Well, like
trumpet,
the horns or trombones.
trumpet and a sax would be very different, but a trumpet and a trombone would be quite similar because of the mouthpieces. So like, a sax, it's actually a reed instrument, and you've got that, it's actually the whole thing is in your mouth. Where with the trumpet and the trombone, it's actually a mouthpiece on the outside, and that's the one where you're pursing the lips, like you're talking about with that. I think so, embouchure or whatever it is. There's certain expression for the way you have your lips held for the way right, how much you squeeze it exactly.
And if they're getting that muted sound, they basically have something in the front, right? Like
Right. Like, well, they'll have
like a
like something
actual
covering
muter.
the bell. Wah, 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 wah. Like they can cover it like that to get that sound if they want to, but it can also just be like that sad trombone sound. A lot of times that's just because of the down bend, because when you
Yeah,
push
like
that
squeezing the
away,
end of a balloon. Yeah, Pan
you
got it.
push it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But to get that down bend, actually turn the volume way down. To get that down bend on a trombone, you're actually pushing away from you, so you're extending it out there like that. But I always thought it would make sense to me that it would have been, the closer to you that you have that held in the trombone, the higher the note, and the further away, the lower the note. But if you were to go through a scale, it's like you're pushing it further and pulling it closer back and forth. So it's like like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and like like they're not where you would expect them to be. I would have expected it to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, like moving further and further away as it goes, but it's more like back and forth for each of the positions, and you have to know how far for each one. So if you're, again, if you're in the root key, you're here, and if you want to get to that other note, you have to push this far versus that far. Two different notes. But there's also how tight you're pushing in terms of how high in an octave you're going. So the same hand position could be 3 different notes, or either 2 or 3 different notes, depending on how much pressure you're pushing. So you just hold it in one position and go boop, 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 like up an arpeggio, because you're actually holding that one spot and going up and down versus going through the motion back and forth. So 2 different ways of changing what you're playing.
But the pitch is being done by valves.
Both. Well, no, the trombone has no valves. It's literally just
Oh
how
yeah, the
far you're pushing.
trombone, you got the slide, right? Like
Yeah,
you actually do your pitch with that big.
it's the slide and the amount of air you're pushing essentially. Like the if you're really relaxed, you're gonna get very low sounds, and if you're then it's the lowest. Let's say the lowest 7 notes would be as low as you can push, where you're just barely getting a note out and hitting those 7 positions with the hands. And then if you are pushing more air, or a lot more air, you're playing a higher note or a higher octave of all those same 7 positions. But I think again that it's not always just the same note, not like always just it's not always going to be those. I think it might be like the G's in the middle, like something like that. But I'd have to look
See,
at the
and,
actual way
and
it works.
and that's one of those instruments where the samples nowadays
Mhm.
really sound fantastic for brass, like trombone. But even with a good sample of the sound, if you can't incorporate some of the breathing techniques, because
Mhm.
breathing techniques through a keyboard or just MIDI in general can be very tricky. There is actually a breath event in MIDI, but if you really want to utilize it, you need to get some kind of controller
Yep.
that allows you to, because there is MIDI, there is a MIDI flute. Roland has one, and they also have what's called the aerophone,
Yeah,
which is a
I saw that.
hybrid.
I was
It's
like,
like a
oh, that looks like fun.
clarinet, it's like a saxophone all in one. It has the valves and the buttons, and saxophonists out there who want to go digital love the Roland,
That
the aerophone.
these wouldn't be the brass ones, but there were two that I've worked with, or two of the things that people have brought to gigs that we've worked with. That were one was the vocal one that I always just call it Peter Frampton. Um, it's that Peter Frampton sound,
Yeah,
like
the
you get that
talk
sound.
box.
The talk box when it's
Yep.
just for the vocal part, but there's also somebody who had one that was the same thing, but it was a vocal controller for the guitar. So it was like another expression pedal, but you would use the air, like it's just a big straw, like next to their microphone, so they could just put it in their mouth and push
Have a
a
good
certain
night,
amount of
man.
air in order to make it later, Pen. And you push, a certain amount of air to get like that. Same thing as using a foot pedal, but now your feet are freed and not have to do it because you're using your air to push it because you're not doing anything with your with your vocal at that point.
Yeah, they do actually have like a MIDI talk tube that you can run through the keyboard via MIDI. Never been brave enough to to try it, but I could, now thinking about it, I can see usefulness with these, especially if I'm trying to utilize a breath controlled instrument.
Mm-hmm. One way to even practice that or to figure out if that's something that you would want to invest in or whatever is one of those little, was it melodica we talked about, like that little
Hmm.
keyboard,
Yeah.
which I mean that thing can't cost much because it's just this tiny little thing.
Oh yeah,
It's a
those are
tiny little
cheap
thing.
as hell.
You just breathe through it because that'll give you a good example of the harder you breathe while you're playing, the louder it'll get. So you can play very gentle little lines, just like you.
Yeah, and they do make MIDI melodicas.
Yeah, exactly. And the guy, one of the guys at the open jam the other day, or no, it might have been a guy at the gig. I've seen two of them recently. One was at an open jam and one was at a gig. At the gig, the guy had brought it and it just plugged it in. So it had, 1/4 inch output right on it. So it was just straight 1/4 inch out and he was able to play and have it, straight into an amp or straight into the board, depending on how they were setting up. Might have been a DI box that day.
And I think I'd rather try a melodica than an accordion. Because the sound that you get out of those two are very similar. An accordion is just basically doing the same thing as the melodica does, except you're pushing the air
In
with
some
that whole
senses,
motion.
I would prefer the accordion in that regard because it's not something I have to put in my mouth. It's not something I have to worry about, breathing, all the time with. It's just with the accordion, you're doing, it's bellows. So it's just, and it's not that you have to constantly be,
I
I mean,
think you
you
got to
are
be in
constantly
better
going in
shape.
or out.
If you're going to do accordion, you better have some muscle because that
What about the
looks
little
like,
one? Is it a concertina? The one that's like a little tiny accordion?
oh
It's like
yeah,
just a couple little buttons on it. Like that one looks like fun. It's like
it's a
instead of that
baby
big one.
accordion.
Yep. That one's like the best of both worlds. It's not super huge that you have to worry about it, and you're still getting that whole thing going on.
And I always wondered why somebody would play an accordion when I was young. I was like, oh, why would you play that when you have pianos and keyboards? But I'm realizing, as I get older and appreciate instruments and their sounds for what they are, it's awesome that there's instruments like the accordion and the genres that they tend to feed, like polka.
Yeah, yeah.
Polka couldn't exist if there was no accordion. I think.
And part of what makes it so easy to play polka on the accordion is if you've ever, I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked at an accordion, but like
The
it's got the
type
regular
of
keyboard.
the time signatures that they use lend themselves.
It's also the buttons though, the because there's the keyboard buttons, right? Like the regular keyboard that's on there, but then there's these whole bank of buttons that your other hand is over
Aren't
by.
those like the chord buttons?
Those are
Like
chord buttons, and the
yeah,
button
like
that's
like
right
with the
next to,
organ.
when you're going back and forth between the 1 and the 5, those are the buttons that are next to each other. So boom, 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 and that's where that is so common of a thing in polka because those buttons are literally right next to each other. So it makes it super easy to just bounce and get really started very easily on that, just going back and forth between those. And then you got something like a recorder.
Now with the winds and the flutes and things like that, those are also tuned at the instrument, right? That just like the
That's the question.
harmonicas and
I would say so, but it
like a
depends
flute
because
is at a certain tuning, right?
to me, that I'm not 100% sure. To me, it looks like a flute has enough to it that it could be fully diatonic, but I would have to check. But something like an Indian flute, for example, it only has 5 holes or 6 holes in the top, for example, that would be more likely to be in a particular key like that. Where something like a saxophone, for example, I wouldn't picture as being that way because it has so many different keys on it. But I haven't really checked to be sure. When we're playing them on the keyboard, we have access to everything. So that's the other thing that makes it where you can translate to notes that you might not be able to do. That's not what an
Yeah, you
accordion
get a
sounds
lot
like.
more flexibility when you play the instrument through a keyboard.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can get that full extra range, and some of the sounds don't even have full range. Where if you play a bass sound and you're playing it high up, it might sound like an ocarina. Or if you're playing an
Yeah,
ocarina
yeah,
and you play it down low, it's so low you can
and
almost
that's just it. You could
not hear
have
it.
the greatest sample in the world of certain instruments, but if you try to play it at the bottom half or the top half of the keyboard,
But that's where
the
that's where the MIDI
sample is
events.
made for a certain space in its tone.
But that's where you can fix that lickety split with those MIDI events because you can just say instead of E3, hit E4, or instead of
E4. Yeah.
E4, hit E2. You can very easily adjust what note it's hitting just by saying not that one, that one.
Yeah, and the nice thing with MIDI is you don't have to go do that for each event that E3 is being hit.
Mhm.
MIDI has great filtering options. That event editor that I showed you, you can basically go to on the whole track and say change all E3s to
Mhm.
E4, or transpose the whole damn track,
Mhm.
make the whole damn track an octave higher.
I
Matter
think
of
that was part of
fact,
the way they were doing the drum
if
replacer too, is
if
being
you
able
want
to
to
select
see
all of this
how
note.
easy it is, this
Mhm.
is how easy it is to transpose a track. Because it is something I do all the time. And in the MIDI world, it's really useful to be able to go up or down an octave. Like when you have bass tracks, a lot of times my bass samples actually play better an octave higher. So you take a listen to this bass track here. And if I wanted that to go,
we're still at 240.
oh yeah, no wonder.
Like what?
It did sound pretty cool though for the bass track.
I was like, that, you'd be tired real fast.
Oh, I,
Try to keep up, son.
there we go.
There we
That sounds like the right bass track.
go. Okay.
So, so if I wanted that an octave higher, um, because the sampler I'm using, the Halion sampler especially, all the bass samples, I think Steinberg purposely sampled them an octave higher for perfection. So it's almost always when I'm remastering these MIDIs,
Mhm.
when I use that sampler and I'm using these MIDI tracks, I almost always have to transpose it up an octave.
One thing
And
about that actually is that I noticed with Meticulous, for example, when you go into the settings, there was something talking about whether middle C is at C3 or C4. I think
oh,
as a
yeah,
question. So
by establishing middle C that way, you kind of transpose the whole thing.
right. So I'm wondering if that is like because it was saying with a certain kind of keyboard. I wasn't sure if it was Roland versus Casio or if it was like Roland versus everyone else or if it was something else. I don't know if you look at it
Sometimes it
again.
feels like it's Roland versus everyone else.
Because it was like basically talking about the fact that in standard notation or whatever, one of them considered middle C to be C3 and one of them considered it to be C4. So it could just be that you need to make that one adjustment and then everything would be appropriately in the spot where it should.
Well, I think the problem in the case of the Halion is just how they sampled their basses,
Right.
because it's
And
not a
that's also one
problem
of
with
those
any of the
narrow.
other instruments. I
It's also a
rarely
narrow focus instrument.
transpose. The only other tracks I might transpose once in a while are like piano tracks or guitar tracks, depending on whether I want to make it brighter and an octave higher.
And piano has
But
all that range because you got those 88 keys and you're used to that. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
guitar
And
also has a lot of room on it, so that's
those
another one that works
instruments
well.
tend to sound good across everything, but a lot of times bass samples will only have a limited range. Halion, you
Mhm.
can see on the keyboard which samples you which notes you can use on a particular sample. So if that sample only has like a 1-2 octave range,
Mhm.
if I'm hitting at the wrong octave, I'm not getting a sound.
Yeah, and I've had that happen where like I hear the bass line, do do do, and I'm expecting like these little high hits, like do 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 do, and like the high notes are not there, and you're like, wait, what happened? And you take a look, and yep, that note or that instrument, I should say, cuts off at that note. So you just have to transpose the whole thing down an octave, or just take those high notes down an octave, make them fit in there.
Hey, RD. So we're taking a look at different things tonight, some MIDI techniques. If you want to transpose a MIDI track up an octave in Cakewalk, this is how easy it is. I've selected the bass track and I'm going to right click over it and you go down to process effect. Uh, nope, insert effect. No, process effect. Yes. There we go. We're going to run a MIDI effect on this track. And the MIDI effect we're going to do is transpose. But as you can see here, there is some other useful stuff we can look at in a future show because all of these you can have fun with. But the transpose, it's as simple as bringing that up. And if you go to the presets, the beauty of like simple transposition, like I want to go up a fifth, I want to go up an octave, all the common stuff, it's right here in the presets. And right down at the bottom, that's what I always do to my bass tracks. Bring them up an octave to run it through my Halion sampler. So I do that. It does the offset. Everything's all set. You can audition it, see what it's going to sound like. Oh, it's not actually playing through here, but if I hit OK. Oh, you know why it wasn't playing through here? I was soloing the track, but I wasn't soloing the synthesizer. So if I don't, if you only solo one thing, oh, and notice they're paired. I don't know how I managed to do that without having the synthesizer on. But now we should hear it an octave higher.
Nice.
And it's nice, clean transposition. I mean,
But if you were to now transpose it up another octave, then you'd start getting out of range, and like those high notes might even disappear fully.
oh yeah, it would start to sound very plucky. Here, we'll bring it up another octave. It's plucky.
It's very plucky.
But that's how easy it is to transpose up and down an octave, a fifth,
With MIDI files, not with NAV files.
with MIDI files. Yes.
That's the one key right there.
And I don't like it. I want it to go back to normal. Bring it back down 2 octaves.
Yep.
No distortion to the sound. Like the tone of that bass sounds exactly the same. It just sounds higher.
Mm-hmm. Yep. As if it was well in tune or well intonated and you're up where you needed to be.
So transposition is something that you should occasionally do in MIDI, and it can be useful, especially with basses. Um, again, pianos, sometimes I will bring them up and down an octave, if for nothing else, for like thickness.
Mhm.
Guitars, I have transposed guitars down to get like some chug.
Sure. And that way you don't introduce the actual, like if you just tuned the guitar down, you might get introduce more like floppiness in the strings. It might not sound quite the same, but if you do it
Yeah,
this way, you're just bringing the tone down.
And that's the beauty of doing this stuff, say on the sampling side. Like, whereas a real guitar, you start down tuning like that, yeah, the strings eventually lose the ability to play because of their floppiness. You don't get that when you're transposing in the keyboard world. You
Also depends on the
can
strings themselves. If you're
detune.
using big fat strings, then you can go lower more easily, but they still get looser as you get lower and lower. And there are limits to where things are just getting so floppy or loose that things don't sound right or they don't feel right.
Let's
Either
see
way, it
what
can be a
this
problem.
guitar track. And this is where I would start touching up the MIDI. Like, this is a track where I wouldn't use the first of all, I don't use the TTS. It's awesome that it's there. It's a great general MIDI
It's a good option.
synthesizer to
Yeah.
get started, but I spent 4 grand on my Roland. I use my Roland, and I also use the Halion sampler. Between those two, when I want a good guitar sound, that's where I go.
Nice.
And also with guitars, to get, like, say this is the solo track. Once you bounce this to audio, and this is something that's good for people to know, when you have a soft synthesizer, the beauty is you can bounce this track almost instantly. When you're using a physical synthesizer like my Roland, I have to play the entire on my Roland. What I would have to do is I would make a new audio track. I would set it to record, and then solo the instrument that I want to do, and literally record the MIDI synth playing it to the audio track. And if you do this, oh, and you're not in Zoom timing out your instrument. Let's try that again, see if it can handle it. It's using my Realtek card, so I'm not surprised that it can't. Uh, when you have a wimpy sound card, yeah, it has a hard time trying to play the audio and record it. My Roland Phantom, I can do this all day and not get those timeouts. But rather than record this way, which is like so old school, like you literally, if you have a this is a 4-minute song. If I want to record these tracks, you got to play each one all the way through to an audio file to bounce them. Very time consuming. With a soft synthesizer, because we're using, I'm going to delete this track. Because we're using this TTS soft synthesizer, what we can do is we can, and I'm going to move it up to the top here just because I don't like my soft synths at the bottom. But if you do this the right way, there's an option up here to bounce a track. And before I go to bounce this track, I'm going to establish what it is I want to bounce. For this particular track, I want to bounce this area right here. And if you select the track and you use the control key to select the soft synth, you gotta select the soft synth. This is it. I spent the first year doing this, and I could never bounce my soft synths because I didn't catch on to this one little thing. But once you select the soft synth as the last thing, notice these are both orange. When I go to track here and I say bounce to track, I'm saying bounce this track. It already knows the Cakewalk TTS is the audio engine. And if I do this, voila, seconds. And now I have a new track down here, which doesn't have a great name, but we'll say E guitar. But if we take a listen to this is now an audio version of that track. So I just turned that MIDI into an audio version using the TTS guitar that it's using. Now, now that
It's still at
is
242, right?
Oh yeah, it keeps reverting back to that because I've got it set somewheres when I set it.
It's a great
I
way to make quick little examples. Da-da-da-da-da-da.
yeah, see the reason why it keeps reverting is look at this tempo track. So when I changed it,
Oh, that's all messed up.
yeah, I changed it basically for everything from up till there. But if I want to change it across all of them, then and there's no need for a song to actually have this many, like it's the same damn tempo all the way through. Like this is just, clunky programming. But resetting it, tempo tracks are pretty easy to control. As you can see, like I could just go and grab all these and say, stop changing my tempo. Oh, and now it won't go to 242.
Would all of those
But
events cause a lot more overhead?
yeah, that's another reason why, like, there's no reason to be punching in a bunch of tempos like that, especially when the tempo is not changing. Hey, Uni, good to see you.
It's happening, man.
So we've got this audio bounce that we just did of this solo. We went from MIDI and now we have an audio track. The beauty of the audio track is now I can start actually using real effects, like guitar effects. So if I go and say, I want to use the TH3, which another free out of the box with
Oh yeah, that's
Cakewalk,
a good one.
Overloud makes an awesome guitar amp simulator. And this is a great way to make a MIDI guitar start to sound better. So here's the TH3, and I'm going to go to my favorite preset of all time. Love airy chords. And we go looks. Now I've got the TH3 on this audio track, and it's going to make it sound a lot better. Versus
Almost
that.
heard a little bit of Guns N' Roses in there.
Yeah. But see, that is a good way to make like a MIDI guitar does sound a little fake, a little thin. Unless you have really great guitar samples like the Halion guitars that I have. Halion, worth buying just for the guitars, never
What about
mind the brasses and everything else.
I always wonder how much the guitars themselves, the guitar sounds themselves matter versus the amp sims themselves. Like, is it better to go big on the guitar stuff or big on the amp stuff or just have a little bit of both?
Well, in the keyboard world, it's better to have good guitar samples. I would rely on the sample first before I would try to make a crappy sample sound better through guitar amp simulator.
Yeah.
But for guitarists, obviously, the priority is a good amp simulator. Like your guitar tone, you massage that at the guitar level.
Muted guitar, clean guitar.
Notice as I turn that back on, that's one thing with that airy effect in the TH3.
It kept it all that time.
Well, yeah, it sits in a buffer. So like
It was saving
sometimes
it for you.
sometimes when you turn it back on, you'll continue to hear the echo.
They're
Oh,
like,
yeah, yeah,
they're
yeah.
like,
See,
we weren't done with you yet.
Uni's asking, so you render the MIDI track to use the plugin. Yes. That's what I did here, Uni. This was here, I'll delete it. and we'll do it real quick again.
Mhm.
The nice thing with soft synths, it's so fast to do that it's easy to show. Delete track. So any one of these MIDI tracks, if I go to this guitar track is using, I think it's a clean guitar. So, so I've got this MIDI guitar track and I'm using the TTS synthesizer. It's the one that comes with Cakewalk. To bounce this, I have to select this track first, and then I hold down the control key and select the synthesizer. Now that these are both selected, and look up here at this big green bar that says what it's going to bounce, and I don't really need to bounce that far. I'm going to bounce to here. It's good to leave a tail. You don't want to bounce just the actual thing, because if you do this, the guitar is going to cut off right here. So I'm going to actually bounce it a little further,
It also
and I'm going
is
to,
a pretty long sounding tail, so you might want to leave it pretty long.
yeah, yeah. Actually, in the case of guitars, I tend to actually go to the end. So we'll set it. We'll set it for the entire. Now on the front end, I don't worry about the beginning. All of this is event data. It establishes the synth stuff, but I don't need to bounce it. It's not sound. This is where the sound starts. It goes all the way to here. With these two things selected, I go up to track and I go to bounce to track. And as long as your source is set to tracks, not to these, but tracks, and your source track is the soft synth. Right now I'm using the TTS. If you have another soft synth, that's what you would see there. And then I hit OK, wait a couple of seconds, and I'm going to have a track 11 in a second, and it's going to be an audio version of that MIDI track. So see, now we look at this and I rename it guitar 2. And if you look at this is a wave copy, a wave bounce of that guitar 2 MIDI.
And
And
this is
it's you.
also a good example of the 74 velocity, right? So like this is what a wave looks like at 74 velocity on the guitar.
Yeah, yeah. Based on the volume that this guitar is set to,
What would
on
happen if
all
we brought
those
that up
hits.
from 74 to say 100 on the velocity for the whole thing? I'm just curious how much of a difference it would make to the track, because this is also the kind of experimenting that you can
Well,
do with
see,
seeing how
notice
things feel.
notice on this guitar track, the one we were looking at, the solo one, was at
Right, right.
74.
Yep.
This one is all over the place.
Ah,
So like, yeah, I'm hitting the A, I'm hitting it a
that's
little
good.
softer.
That's dynamics. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you see a lot of dynamics here. If I really wanted it to all be like with a guitar, you wouldn't want a flat dynamic.
Right.
But if
That's
I
more like
wanted to,
harpsichord, but yeah.
I could literally tell this to reset all those velocities to 1, and then it would sound a little mechanical because everything would be hitting at like 100.
One thing that was that in one of them, you were able to select them all and bring them all up or down by the same amount. Like, let's, instead of saying all of them, I want them to be all 74. If we just grabbed them all and we're able to say, I want them all to be -5 of where they are, or -10 of where they are. You know what I mean? Like,
And those same MIDI effects that I was
mhm.
showing you, when you go into process effects and you go to the MIDI effects,
Velocity is one of
um,
them. Yeah, yeah.
yes, velocity is one of them. And when you look at the different presets,
Bam.
the standard ones
Mhm.
are like, hey, put everything to one thing, put
Full,
everything
half, and
to
zero.
and random hi-hat. Some drummer
I like
made
that actually.
sure that like
No,
that got in
that's
there.
a good one, because that's one of the big things is hi-hat sounds so mechanical. So if you just have a fully, you have the mechanically full hi-hat on, right on the beat, and then you just do that, varies it a little bit, it makes it sound a lot more human.
But here's another cool thing. You could reset everything. Like I'm going to reset everything to 64 right now.
Mhm.
So now it's set to make every velocity of every note on this track be at 64. But you know what? I don't want them all to be at 64. I want them to have
Randomize
a
it.
range
Mhm.
between 64 and you know, another level. So anything between 64 to say if we scale, if we use the scale percentage, we can actually do it by percentage and say, we can do it 20%, 15% in either direction
Mhm.
and set a limit. So like, I never want you to go over uh 100.
Mhm.
So these velocity settings, after you get done picking a preset, like these presets are just going to establish,
It's a guideline or
yeah,
baseline.
like I just nullified everything to 64. But
Mhm.
now as I go through these, each one of these will affect things from 64. So if I say change to, -10,
Mhm.
then everything's going to go from 64 to 54
Yep. Nice.
and scale. Uh, I think that's on the octave level, although it's percentage.
That's what I was thinking. Scale would be like if we had it at 80%, then it's saying, it's going to
Oh,
take
yeah, yeah,
80%
yeah,
into
yeah.
account or something like that.
That makes more sense.
Or it acts on 80% of the notes. That's another one where it could just be leaving some of them alone and only acting on certain ones.
Yeah, and these other ones here, like the limit says never go above something
Mhm.
or never go below something, depending on how you set it. Change is how much, and the gradually would be like the shift between the change,
Mhm.
and the randomize is where it gets really
That's what I was
cool
looking for.
because
Yeah.
you can like set a bottom and a top and then tell it to
So
randomize
free form in the middle. Yeah.
in the case of certain things like drums. A lot of times when you download the MIDI on the internet, the drums tend to be programmed very static, like they are all at 127. A lot of lazy drum programmers out there. All you got to do is run something like this on that drum track and randomize it between 101 to 127,
Yeah.
and things will start to have some dynamics to their hits.
Even
Like
105 to
everything's not going to
115. I
hit
mean,
at the
any
same.
any amount of variation makes a lot more of a difference to your ear than you would think to take something from very mechanical to sounding much more human.
Mm.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's like what Uni's saying. It's like an actual recorded guitar track with compression. That's kind of what compression does. It sets a top and a bottom and pushes everything in between.
Hmm. Let's see what it does. Dun dun dun.
So you might not notice the differences,
Hmm.
although it is quieter, because this is what the original settings sounded like.
Yep, yep. Very much quieter.
Like it brought the volume down in half,
Yep.
and it lost some of its pluck.
That's what we were talking about. Also, was the wave file itself that you see how fat it is. You see how it's much more. It looks like it's bottom heavy compared to the top, but that might just be my
Well,
eyes.
and that's with synthesizers, you will see variation on your left rights. Synths do really like utilize stereo a lot in their patches,
Mhm.
especially piano patches, guitar patches, certain drum kits. You will see differences left to right. And this one does have a little bit more of a, this guitar sound has more of a bottom end. You see it in certain parts, especially right here.
Mhm. Yeah.
And again, because now I have an audio bounce of the MIDI, I can apply audio effects. So if I go up here and again, we'll go to the TH3
Hmm.
and I want to give it a little distortion. Let's give it
Yeah. So it's
a dual clean fuzz lead. Let's see what that sounds like.
so many options for all the cabinets and effects and all
Yeah,
that. You go
as
crazy
you can
with it.
see now, having an audio bounce and something like the TH3.
Mhm.
I can really shape this guitar sound into whatever the hell I feel like it should sound like. It sounded like a MIDI guitar
Mhm.
out after the bounce, but when you start to add actual guitar effects to it, it starts to sound. See, and being able to adjust like, these effects the way you can these days. I mean, this is like having hundreds of dollars worth of boxes for free that
And
you
who
can,
doesn't love that? Mhm.
yeah, and really, the TH3 is the baby version. The funny thing is the real overloud product, if you can get it, is called the THU. Every guitarist should check it out. All these presets you see, all these amp simulators that you see in here, um, that's just out of the box on this free baby version. The
Nice.
THU comes with hundreds more
Mhm.
plus expansion packs, that like the British Invasion pack. And next thing you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you've got like every classic amp that came out of Britain in the last 50 years.
Nice.
And they do a good job of like, breaking it down into, you see all these different amps and cabinets and effects pedals that are all part of it. And when you pick these presets, um, you see like your actual
You see what it actually
equipment,
looks like. Yeah, where
you
the mics
know
are placed. Yeah, everything.
and
Because you can
that's
put them
what
off
I love.
center. Yeah,
I mean, really, I wish I had this ability back in the 90s, because I spent so much time moving a mic around, hitting record, moving a mic around, hitting record, and listening to the effect of the mic over here, the mic over there. Now you can do it in seconds and listen to it in real time.
yeah. Now the other thing
Like,
was
oh, the mic
one of the
sounds
things from
better in the middle.
there you go, from when we were watching Jason do some of this and watching him do playing his parts with no effects on it. So like what he was hearing is just like doot, 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 like on something, and then you put it on there, it's like like
Yeah.
you hear all the effects added later. So that's one of those that if you try to add the effects real time while you're playing, just because it sounds cool and it's fun and this and that, um, that's a good way to see what playing this hard or playing this soft or playing digging in this much or using this kind of pick, like seeing all those kinds of changes playing live like that can be good, but then learn what it is that what you need, what you're looking for in the final product, and how the picking attack and everything else affects
Yeah, especially with
after.
guitars, it helps to hear the dynamics of your playing. When you're listening to a clean version, you'll pick up on different things like pick noise or strum noise, and especially if you're miking it. Listening to yourself play clean will give you a better idea of your dynamics that you're actually putting into the wave,
And then hear
and
how it
then
translates to the effects. Yeah.
and how it translates to the effects exactly. So it's not to say it's a bad thing to hear the effect as you're recording the song. Certain songs and certain parts, especially with guitars, you might need to hear the effect. The delay, you might time your hits to, but at the same time, you should be able to do it clean and listen to your parts. You should be comfortable with both.
Yeah, and that was the big one, is being able to forecast or see ahead of time what it's going to sound like with me playing it this way and then adding those effects later and seeing what that's going to add up to, and just by practicing and trying it this way, trying it that way, seeing. But by having it clean in the originally, you could change it to a million different ways afterwards by changing the effects. But if you record it with a bunch of effects, there's only so much leeway you've got to change that afterwards. Like you might have too much effect on it, and now there's only so much you can do to clean it up. or change it to a different style. Whereas if you started clean, you could try this effect, you could try that effect, you could try no effect, you could try echo, you could do all kinds of things to it and see what feels best. But
And of course,
it's got to be clean to
do
start.
do your effects post. Don't record your effects in. Here, I'll bring this back up. And what I mean by that is like right now, this guitar effect
Oh,
is
you got the edge.
happening.
You got the Edgify screen up
Oh,
again.
yeah, no, it's a good thing I have that locked and loaded and ready.
I like it. The mustache.
So right now, the effect to this track is all being done post. It's in this effect rack that's here. So, if I want to hear what it sounds like with and without, turn off the effect. This is clean. This is with effect. If you are going to utilize effects, never record the effect into the recording. That's called a wet track. And there's many of us who are like so anti wet track. I will almost refuse to work on some projects if I'm told that all I have are wet tracks to work with. Then it's a big buzzkill to sound engineers when they can't adjust an effect or they can't turn it off.
It also
And that
depends. Is it wet or is it drenched?
exactly,
Because
because
there's a
you
problem.
know where when I have issues with it, it's almost always like guitarists or singers who are saturating the shit with out of their tracks with reverb and delays, the kinds of things that like these are effects that you add at the mastering level, at the post production level. You don't need reverb and delays recording your tracks.
Because you can decide how much to add into it at the end, but if there's
You can't take it out.
108%, if there's 108% in there, you can't get that 8% out very easily. Yeah, that's the trick.
Oh yeah, Uni's saying playing through an actual rig and taking a DI is the best. The amp
Yeah.
is good. Is that what he's saying? Amp is G.
The Galaxy.
Yeah, I like to be able to clean my tracks up. If somebody records in things that might need to get pulled out, then you're going to hear me say you need to re-record that track. And not all people like to hear that, but if you didn't record it right the first time, then yes, you go back and re-record it if you're really serious about your songs.
Mm-hmm.
And a sound engineer tells you you need to re-record
And if you're
it.
hearing it from more than one person, you should start thinking, why is everybody telling me this?
Well, all serious sound engineers, if you're going in the studios and you're not doing things the right way, they will tell you to do it the right way.
And if you're
Or
going
they
into
or
studio,
they'll make you re-record it in the studio and they'll charge you for the time.
yep. And if you're going into the studio, that's not the time to practice the songs. That's the time to get the songs that you've all worked out your parts, you've all worked it out together, and you're going to the studio to put it down. Like that's if you're going to a recording studio, that's the big one there too. You don't want to waste the recording engineer's time if you're going into record. If you're just going to studio time, just random, hey, we're going to the studio, and they just oh yeah, right there, plug in, turn on, do what you want.
Yeah, and the
That's
nice
different.
thing nowadays, I mean, technically we're already in studios. Like right now, I'm
Right.
sitting in my studio.
Yeah.
So if I'm going into another studio, I've already practiced in mine before I go into theirs.
Another big one that is super easy. It's one of those obvious things, but just having the instruments out, having things like if you're a piano player, have the piano out. Like we'd be willing to just sit down and do stuff, even if it's just 5 minutes here and there, because it makes a big difference. And for
That's
me, it's like
why I
my
took out the
piano's
guitar.
my
Yeah, I
piano's
figured
on
if
the
I have
drum
to
kit.
if I have to look at the guitar,
Yeah.
Glenn and Jason are going to make me eventually play it.
And I did call it out the other day. I was like, "Is that an
Yeah, you
acoustic
did.
behind your chair there?" I was like, "Oh shit,
Oh,
we're gonna get
Jason
into
picked
that."
up on it too, like the
Yeah,
day I
nice.
put it out there.
We'll get into that for sure.
Yeah, I figured that was gonna like help get me off my ass there.
Yep. There's a lot of pretty easy stuff that we can go through that'll just make it to where it's that much easier to get you on the path to, again, to me, the big thing is the ear. Being able to hear stuff and being able to find it on the guitar and being able to quickly figure out what key it is or what pentatonic works with it, and you're just able to just jump in and make music. You're able to join in with whatever you're listening to, and to me, that's huge. That's one of those things that really opened things up for me, to be able to just jump in and do that kind of thing, or just listen to whatever and pick up little things here and there, little pieces of whatever's going on, because that kind of stuff makes it that much more rewarding to just be able to pick up whatever and go. One of my favorite things.
Yeah, I've got to get more comfortable with jumping on things. I'm not one of those musicians who's like, I don't go stomp on projects or like things that I should to get challenge myself. I kind of get nudged along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like
Or
Vinny said, you should try
I
the guitar. You already know music, and you'd be surprised at what you're actually able to do. Yeah, for sure. Because your ear already knows so much about the different scales, the different things that sound right together, the different chords. And once you realize that on the guitar, once you figure out how to play a major scale on a guitar, you now know all the major scales. So it's not that F sharp, F sharp major is no different than A major, is no different than C major, is no different than B flat major. They're all the same exact pattern. It's just where you start on the guitar that makes the difference. So once you know that major scale and you get that down under your fingers, you can play all the major scales. The only
and I
difference is
think
how far apart the frets are.
I think that's the main compelling reason for me why I want to start learning guitar and bass,
Mhm.
because how complex it is for me to try to do my scales on the keyboard side, and the difficulty I'm having trying to play B flat major.
Yep.
I see on the guitar how easy it is for you guys, and I think it'll translate for me. I
Yeah,
think when I do go
it
back to the
does.
keyboard afterwards, it will start to click in faster.
Yep. And one of the big ones is not trying to start in with the full chord progression necessarily, because to me, again, figuring out which pentatonic works is a great starting point. And then once I'm there, I figure it's either going to be what feels like, if it's all the black notes again, just as an example, it's either going to be this one as a minor pentatonic, because that's the E flat, it's got that space of the 3 between that and then the 3 that are in a row. But for a major pentatonic, it's going to be that first one of the 3 in a row. So if everything's focusing on that one, it's feeling like major pentatonic.
Yeah,
It's
see,
focusing on
and
that one, it feels like minor
Uni's
pentatonic.
saying lead with your ears. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, most of the time, that's the thing in charge.
Mhm. And that's the thing, is some people, it's all about sight reading. They were classically trained. They did a lot of sight reading. They know how to read music and tab and everything else. And if it's on the page, they can do it. But if it's not on the page, they're like, well,
Well,
what am I
and
supposed to play? I don't have anything to play.
there's
That's where
times
it's
where
important to
you're
follow your.
trying to be technical,
Mhm.
and you do want to go through the motion. I want to do 1 5 4. You want to hit very specific things technically, and
Mhm.
then there's other times where you hear this slide and this emotion, and your ears, you're trying to like discover the sound that you're trying to make. In which case, it's not as simple as like, oh, I just have to do a 1 5 4 6. In those cases, it's like I will hit a chord, and then I'll think of it's like what you showed me last year, Glenn, when you had those guitar chords, and you showed like all the different possibilities from one chord. Like there was like 10 different ways you can go
Yep.
from that one chord.
Mhm.
It's kind of how I approach arranging chords like that. I
Mhm.
will hold it, listen. Where does it want to go?
Yep.
Is this right? Do I want to go up? Do I want to go down?
Sometimes you do both. Some
Well,
parts of the chord go
or
up and some parts
sometimes
go
you
down.
hold that D on the
Mhm.
high end as you shift the rest.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden you've got a melody. There's one note in the whole progression that's kind of saying, I'm the melody to this song.
Mhm. Yep. And if you were doing like again, an A minor pentatonic is one of those that we do all the time. If you're doing it, or an A minor, even just a chord, if you're doing the root and the 5 in the left hand, and then we were talking about doing the 7 and the 3 in the right hand, right? At one point, it's just talking about being able to do and just getting sounds like that, but it sounds all spread out. So it sounds like
I was gonna
big
say
open chord.
that's a strength of you on the keyboard. You do spread out like me. I tend to be like my left and my rights tend to be close to each other or very relative almost all the time. But I've noticed thanks to the fact I can see your keyboard, that you can really play your chords all the way on both sides, which is useful.
I also a lot of times I cheat and I use both hands. Like if I'm playing just an A minor, I do this where you don't see it, but I'm actually using my left index finger and my right index and middle. So I'm using these three to play that chord. So it wasn't a one hand thing, and part of it's because of where I'm sitting. So it's like if I go lower,
Well, plus you got monster hands, man. You could probably play both sides of that keyboard with
oh
one
yeah.
hand.
Well, like let's take a C chord for example.
You're doing
I'm
that with
holding all
both
of
your
those.
hands? Holy
That's 10
shit, man.
notes.
I see you holding them. Yeah, I don't have that kind of spread.
But that's the thing. That doesn't. It's not very useful in playing times. But when you're playing an octave,
If you
and then you can go up.
let's say that spread right there, if you were to play it slowly, 60, 70 BPM with a nice piano sound and let the notes kind of trail each other,
Mhm.
that whole spread turns into a beautiful little arpeggio all the way up and down.
Almost sounds like harp. Almost sounds
Yeah.
like playing a harp if you're doing like.
And with the harp, they do that, but it's so much easier.
But being able to hold them down, that's where the pedal helps too, because you could just be playing all of that and holding the pedal down, and it sounds like you're holding them all at the same time. But you can cheat and use the pedal. But
How does the tuning on a harp work?
that I'm not sure. But it looks like
It's not like guitar tuning, right? Because the
no.
way that they go up and down, like you see harp players like literally jumping up and down to particular strings because there's no fretting.
Yeah, to
Or
me the
or
way it
is there
looks,
fretting?
there's no fretting. But the what I see is like the furthest ones away are the shortest strings, so those would be the highest notes. The ones that are in that like the bend of the harp, where they're the really short strings, and then the parts that are right closest to the person playing are the longest strings. So I think those are the lowest notes and the fattest strings. So if you're going like if the sound goes up, that's them pushing away like and they
So
might be
would you
skipping or
say that
plucking.
that's like the same situation as, say, a grand piano? If
Yeah,
you open it up and you look at the strings,
yep,
if you were to play it inside
yeah.
with,
I've done that. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean that's kind of what the harpist is doing.
Yep.
And they do have different tuned harps because you got those big ass ones and then you got those tiny little ones that are almost like banjos.
Mhm. And that's the thing is I don't know if they're the same thing, whether they're diatonic instrument, which I assume they are because of how many strings they have. It looks like you could easily have all 12 tones throughout the whole thing, rather than having it like a harmonica where you're staying in one key. This is the C harmonica or the B harmonic. I don't think you have a C harp and a B harp. I would think you have the
Well,
harp, which is the fully
they
diatonic.
pluck
But
and strum. They pluck and strum.
my other question is it one line of strings, or are they like two lines? Like one is on this side where you're hitting them more with the right hand, and these are offset a little bit, and they're on the left side.
Yeah, see,
You know what I mean?
Uni
Like
was
that, I'm
thinking the
not
same
sure.
thing. Like
Hmm.
it almost does feel like the inside of a piano.
Yeah,
If anybody out there plays harp, or any of you know somebody on Band Lab who does, point me to them. I would
yeah.
love to find a harpist.
I've seen some on YouTube who do just like somebody playing a harp out in the woods, and like a deer comes walking up while she's playing harp, and it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like a deer, it's like
Hey.
you're playing something nice. A deer comes walking up and says, hey,
Hell
pretty
yeah,
cool.
you attract wildlife. You're doing something right.
But stuff like that, I was like, yeah, that was nice. And then that
Assuming
they
the
would be nice
deer
to
doesn't
listen
want to bite your head off.
to. No, it was just interested in the sounds. Now the harmonics, that actually reminds me of the sitar more. Whereas with the sitar, it's actually twice as many notes as what we have. We have our 12 notes that we're dealing with in a chromatic scale.
Are
In
sitars double stringed? Are they
it's
like
not
the
that
12 strings, or what gives them
it's
that weird sound?
it's not that they're double stringed the way a 12 string is, where you're hitting two strings at a time, but they have a full set of strings that you never hit that ring sympathetically. So if you're hitting an E string here,
no,
There's an
you
E that
showed me,
rings underneath. Yeah.
you showed me, a guitar that had like,
Yeah. Sitar on the side. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it had like
The choral
strings
sitar.
that you don't play, but you said sympathetic strings, like that it
Sympathetic
actually
vibrations.
plays
Yep.
off of the vibration.
When you strum this chord here, those strings pick up that vibration and start vibrating because of the fact that they're in the same key. It's like two tuning forks of the same note. You bang one, the other one's going to start vibrating just because this one's vibrating near it. So it transfers the vibration because this one picks up on the vibration because that's the vibration at which that material wants to vibrate.
Tone complementing tone, like
Yeah.
that. Either the multiple instruments that it's like hearing the snare. You know, like if say the bass is cranked up in the band room and the bassist is playing and the drummer's not even there, but you can hear the snare when the bassist is
Oh, yeah.
really thumping
When
at
it
it.
when and it's usually a certain note. Like there's that one note where it's like
Yeah.
you hear the snare talking and you're like, hey,
Yeah,
where did that come from?
the snare doesn't respond to just any old bass note, but it's that
and,
level.
and that's where a fretless bass you can like slide your way up and and you find exactly where that happens. You're okay right there. And you know to avoid that note. Play it a little sharp, a little flat, stay around it, but don't actually hit it. Or you can just go over to the snare and just turn that part off because that's actually the little switch.
Yeah, the resonant frequency.
The little switch on the side of the snare when you basically loosen that part and it loosens that thing on the bottom, so it's not going to rattle like that. And if you hit it, the snare would sound more like a tom because you don't have that snare on there. That's just one if it's bothering you when you're in rehearsal and the drummer's not around.
Well, and massaging the sound of a snare. I can't believe how much I appreciate drums these days. Like I never put a lot of thought into the sound of drums throughout the years until the last couple of years, where bass and snare relations and toms, the timbre and tone of them. If I'm glad I'm not a drummer because man, I would go broke.
Yeah, you could really go off the deep end with that for sure.
Well, I'd be like Neil Peart. I'd want to have like 200 things around me and multiple versions of snares just for different purposes.
Drum set.
Oh,
Castanets.
and yeah, those little.
All the percussion.
I'm really liking the wood blocks and sounds like that. Joe's got some new drum kits with his new Novation, and the wood blocks on some of his kits are really inspiring. Like, eh, they got a nice world sound.
They got some good.
Yeah. Hey, congos, bongos. Surprised I don't have a bunch of them.
More cowbell. Lots of good stuff.
And
the other question.
Drum kits, you know, in the MIDI world, if there's one thing most artists, especially like over on BandLab, you may not use MIDI for anything else, but if there's one reason why every artist on BandLab should learn MIDI is because drums have moved there.
Yeah. And things like, I mean, we've seen Easy Drummer, we've seen, what was the other one? Drum Monkey, where you hit a button and the drum monkey just makes you a drum track. So here you go. And then you just hit, no, do it again, and makes it again. But you can change the parameters that are going in. You can change the intensity. You can change all that stuff. But just being able to do an Easy Drummer, being able to just go in and say, I want this piece, this piece, this piece, and being able to cobble together a full verse, chorus, verse, whatever you're trying to put together as a song, you can really put real drums under it without too much difficulty.
You know, that's another thing where like this is a MIDI file of a song, but at the same time, if I go to the drum track and I just want this, I don't want the rest of the song. Can you name this tune right now? No, you can't. But there's a drum beat. like ready to go.
Now
And
you hear that hi hat too. Like if this was like one of those where it was just off the rack, let's say, or you just off you just got the MIDI file, that might all be 64 or whatever. That hi hat might be too much the same. Like
yeah,
it might sound too robotic. So you might go into that the TH3 and just select that other one, saying randomize that a little bit.
and again, like we said earlier, oh, the tempo, 121, not fast enough. So let's go to 180.
240. Now remember, well, we're soloing right now, so that's fine. And if we weren't,
Oh,
then
they went back to
you have the
121.
You have
Son
the
of a
one wave
bitch.
track. Yeah, you didn't have the whole thing selected.
Oh, well,
So
no,
your
I just
tempo
want to hear.
track.
I just want to hear the drums.
You can see your tempo track right there. Yeah.
Yeah. You see how, like, the reason why when I go to change it, it's not global. If you have nodes, which
You got nodes, man.
I have nodes. If I was to delete everything, get rid of all that tempo, get rid of you. You're not worthy. You're not worthy. And I want to set it at the beginning, just like put it at 133. Still not fast enough. Oh, but if I don't,
And you're
if
about
I
to
don't
say
go
it.
back here, you want to be at the point where you want to change things.
Now, the other thing is, if you change
Let's
it here,
make
it's
it
still
180.
is it going to make a new node and it's going to reset?
No,
Okay.
no, because I'm changing it on the only node. I
The
only
only
have
node,
one,
yeah.
and it's at
Before
the
it was because
beginning.
you had
So
so many.
yeah, this is being set now by one node. If I add a node, like now I'm in pencil
You
mode.
might
If I
want it to
say,
go louder, yeah, or faster, I should say. This is the
but
tempo.
it's just like automation. Yeah, see, now we're in the 80s.
Those are birds. That's birds. C in the D minor again.
But with that right there, hearing it at that tempo, would you have any idea that that was Light My Fire's drums? No, you
No.
wouldn't. and
Exactly.
and there's nothing wrong with getting a beat that way.
But I bet you any
This is
two
a drum
pieces.
beat.
I bet you any two pieces. If you had the drums plus any one of the other components,
Oh
you'd
yeah,
probably identify it immediately.
the moment you start to introduce melody, if I play any of these other tracks along with that, with any kind of melody, you're likely to pick up. Here, we'll just do the lead-in track. And this is at a different tempo, mind you. But yes, I know what song I'm listening
Yep. In 2 seconds.
in 2 seconds. Yeah, especially with something like that. How about bass? Something that's more generic.
Absolutely.
Kind of. I might not
It's
recognize.
it's
Well,
super
yeah.
fast, like-
I actually, once it goes through the whole round, I did recognize it.
One thing that's funny about that is the other day, we were setting up a gig. My buddy Mike and I were setting up a gig for this one band, and he was just checking the PA or checking the subs and the mains. So he only had the subs on, and he was playing through his iPhone. And I mean, he knows that I hate Springsteen. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Springsteen at all.
We
I'm sorry,
all
New
know.
Jersey, but I'm not a big fan of Springsteen. His voice kills me. But like, there was a song that was only coming through the subs, and within like a second and a half, I was like, my favorite. And he's just like, what? And I'm like, you don't hear that? And he goes and like then he turns on the mains and he hears it and he's like, really? From just the sub, you can tell that. And I was like, all we heard was the rumble and like the first two, 3 notes, whatever it was. And I'm like, I can name a Springsteen song and shut it off in like 2, 3 notes.
Just by the rumble.
Just from the rumble, just hearing the low end. I was like, yep, nope, get it out of here. But again, that's just something that I have against his voice. I mean, I'm sure he's a great songwriter. People tell me about it all the time. Oh, he's a great songwriter. How could you have anything against him? It's like, I don't have anything against him. I don't particularly want to hear his voice when he's singing. That's all.
Hey, Rolo. Yeah, I don't
Sup,
have
Rolo?
anything against him either, except a lot of times he sounds like he's taking a crap while he sings,
Pretty
which is not the
not a
kind of
good sound.
sound you want when you're trying to sing out your lines. Born in the
Something like,
USA is the perfect example of it.
Yeah. And I was gonna say like something like I'm on Fire, maybe where it's more relaxed. Maybe that's
Yeah,
not so
that's a
bad.
nice one.
Yeah.
That's more of like a crooner type of song.
I will say that Rosalita, that's one that I do tend to like
Thunder
quite a bit.
Road. Thunder Road, I actually do like.
Mhm.
That's like a nice classic rock.
Some
Not
of
to
them did grow
mention,
on me because I was listening to them in like a captive audience. Like somebody else had a mix going and it's on. I'm like, I'm not going to complain about it if somebody else just has it
keep in
on.
mind, that song, Because the Night
Mhm,
Belongs to Lovers, he
mhm,
wrote that. So
mhm,
even though I love her
mhm.
voice in the song,
Sure.
he wrote a great fucking song there.
Mhm. Yep. And like I said, no argument. He's a great songwriter. I have nothing against that. And I didn't mean to go off topic and make it a Bruce bashing session or anything.
Oh,
I
we're
just I
not
just thought
bad.
it was
We
I just thought it was
can't
funny.
bash Bruce.
Yep. It's one of those things. And another band that has a style that seems to divide listeners would be somebody like Rush. Even I mean, I love Rush, but there are a lot of people who they just don't see it or they don't like it or whatever. There seems to be a line there as well.
Yeah, and what divides the listeners? Is it the division of he's the greatest or he's not so great? Because I with Bruce, I would say, yeah, he's not as great as some people seem to like. Let me rephrase that. Um, he's not the legendary status that some people give to him. If I compare him to other musicians in the same vein, but he doesn't suck either. He is a legendary songwriter,
He's in
artist,
there
and
for a reason. Yeah.
musician. It's just my opinion might be that I don't think everything he does was the shit, where there's some hardcore fans who are like, nobody beats the boss. And I'm not there. I
Yeah.
think that's my opinion.
And then I mean the other thing was to me like I wouldn't want to be like in an hour hours and hours long concert of just that.
Oh, I wouldn't
You
mind seeing a concert of him, especially if
I
he
hear he's
had
great
some of
in
the
concert.
old school, like the sax that he had in the 70s.
Oh yeah,
I'd be
Clarence. Get Clarence
totally
out there.
in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The 80s stuff, he really started to lose me at the Born in the USA, like the mid and late 80s, where apparently he sold more albums than ever and was greater than ever. But yeah, I like classic Bruce from the 70s, where he actually was writing real fucking songs that weren't being forced out by the record company.
Hmm. Yep.
Because Born in the USA feels like just a contract song.
Hmm. True. Kind of like one of the formula songs at that point.
The only
And that's
thing
also a question of where it was
the
at the time.
one thing he did there was his formula. Like, yes, he does have that kind of loud shouting style at times, and he emphasized it on that song. And that's the one good thing that came out of that song, is it kind of stapled him for his sound.
Hmm.
But not to me in a good way. That's not the part of him that I actually like as an artist. I like his emotional, more acoustic stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good sound.
Piano and acoustic guitar in him works awesome together.
Hmm. This is true. Good stuff. And that's
Now,
the thing is like
how do you feel about Bon Jovi? Because in
no similar
Jersey,
issues. No similar
those are
issues.
your two
Yeah,
that,
Bon
like,
Jovi, I
you
have no
either
issues with.
bow or you don't.
I've never been to a Bon Jovi concert, but I wouldn't have anything against it. And I could, if Bon Jovi came on the radio, I wouldn't be like, oh. But and a lot of the bands that I work with cover a lot of Bon Jovi, so there's number of reasons why I'm all good with Bon Jovi.
Oh, and there really is no Bon Jovi song that sucks. I mean, there's those that were kind of sleepers on the album, but no bad songs on pretty much any of their albums. They were consistent.
But you do know me, and I'm much more of a jam band guy. So like for me, the Grateful Dead, Fish, things like that, that always took, not always, but for most recent 10, 20 years, that's been more the priority. So there's only a few
Oh,
bands that really kind of fill that whole thing, right?
Uni went Springsteen over Bon Jovi.
I mean, I can't fault
Oh,
somebody for
Bon
that. I mean,
Jovi.
people are welcome to their
We're
opinions for
gonna
sure.
have a war, Uni. And
This
we're gonna
means
have it in New
war.
Jersey at Glenn's house.
That's right, at my house here in New Jersey. Now I can see New York from here. New York City is just over, like through this wall back here. Like New York City is like right over there. If I went up to the roof of this building, I could get nice pictures of the New York City skyline and all that. So it's like literally like less than 10 miles over there. So I'm in Jersey, but not far from New York, and that's where there's all kinds of stuff going on in this particular area because like this is right in that bubble. The one thing that sucks is trying to get anywhere at rush hour. If I want to
Well,
try to
yeah.
leave this area, and someone's like, "Hey, hey, how about we meet for dinner at 6?" It's like, oh. It's like, do you have any idea how hard it is for me to get from here to somewhere by 6? If it's
Yeah.
not 1 here already, it's like that's like the worst time because from 4 o'clock to like 7 o'clock is the time you don't want to be on the roads in this particular area.
Yeah, you
But
might have a
sometimes you can't avoid it.
beautiful sunset and a gorgeous cityscape, but no, don't try to move
Don't try
during
to
those
go somewhere.
hours.
Oh, no, no, no. But if you leave the house after 7 or like at 3 or whatever, you can get where you need to go. We had a gig up in New York, up north from here. Figure it's about 40 minutes north from my house if there's no traffic. So like I wanted to leave, make sure to get there in time. It was supposed to be there at like 5 p.m. And again, not the time to try to be somewhere. So I'm like, it's only 40 minutes
Well,
away. So
at that
I,
time, if you want to be there at 5, you better leave at like 2,
well, I left at
and
3
then
because
sit around for a couple hours.
I left by 3 because between 3, like as long as you're out by like as long as I'm out of this particular area by 3:30, 3:45, I'm fine. And at this point, like I got up there and it wasn't even 4, it was a little after 4. So I got up there and like took my time, went to get some food, grabbed some Gatorades, went up to the place, took a couple pictures from the scenery and all that. I've been doing more of that lately, just taking random pictures of like scenery of where I'm driving for these gigs, or oh, this one's on the water, so take some pictures of the water or whatever, just to have for us to use at some point. But it's fun.
You've got some colleges around you, huh?
Oh yeah,
Uni was mentioning like being in a band in a college town.
oh yeah,
Like a college town is where you want to have a band
oh yeah.
because that's where you can get gigs. That's where you can make radio stations. Bands
Mhm,
can actually get out there and people can party.
mhm.
College towns is where a lot of the music gets
And it also
made.
depends, is it a party college? That's another
Yeah.
good question. And that's where some places like Lehigh, which is over there by Ange, that's one that's a big party school. Like they have, I mean, I remember back when I was in college that they had some good parties up over there. I had some friends that went over there. They tailgating, you could be like drinking at like 6 a.m. on a Saturday and like
Well,
passed out by
as is
noon,
tradition.
as is tradition. It's not a requirement, but it is on the to-do list if you wish, that kind of thing. And in that case, most people wished. And then they got back, and some of them didn't even see the whole game or most of the game. Like the game started, they're like, okay, well we're done. Let's go back and like sleep until party time this evening. Dinner time. It's like, all right, let's do that.
Yeah, it's funny how many sporting events and concerts that I've been to where I didn't even pay attention to the event.
Yep.
Grateful Dead was a perfect example, man. I've been
Yep.
to like 20, 30 shows
Sure.
and
Do you remember any of them?
well, selectively,
Mhm.
but as far as actually seeing them on stage performing, half as many times as all the shows that I went to. More times than not, I would just be outside rotating around, watching the musicians around the stadium.
Because it attracts all.
Didn't
Yeah, I
care if
mean,
I
the
had a
parking lot
ticket
was
in.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and we never went there with a ticket. There was never a single show where leaving Connecticut, we
You had
had a
it.
ticket.
Were they usually in Connecticut when you saw them, or is it usually elsewhere?
No, no, actually, they got banned from Connecticut in like
That's right. That's right.
85. Uh, I didn't get to see them in Connecticut till years later when they finally, like in the 90s, right towards the end, they let them back into Connecticut. But it sucked because um, it was one of the few shows that I went to where were worried about the cops. Like uh, Jamie was trying to hide a joint we were smoking. We're sitting at a Dead show, like out in the street with tons of people. You could smell pot everywhere. And there were these undercover cops that were like kind of hanging out around this tent. And my buddy Jamie was like a radar towards narcs. He's a narc. He's a narc.
You never know. And now one thing that was funny was that seeing them. I saw them half a dozen, maybe a dozen times, probably a dozen times. But some of them were at Madison Square Garden, and I mean that's a nice show. That's a good spot for a show. But seeing the Dead at Madison Square Garden, it's such a disconnect. Like you go going through New York City and like doing all that stuff, and then you get to the place and people are just like literally walking around the walking around the garden and just smoking J's, like passing joints back and forth, like as they're walking around.
Oh man.
But there's also cops walking all the way around. But it was kind of like once people made it into that little perimeter, it was like, okay, they're in there, they're fine, like no problem.
I must have walked around that garden like over 100 times in one weekend.
Oh, nice. He's talking about the harps over here. The harp pedals tune each string,
Ah, Uni
flat,
found the
sharp, and
answer, huh?
natural for each string. So
Good
C, D,
man.
E, F, G, A, B, C for every string. Nice. And then pedals to go up and down. Very cool. Now, I did see the
See
one that I
now an
saw out in
electric
the woods
harp.
there. It looked like she was just playing a harp that only, it was like a harness almost. And so there wouldn't have been pedals with what she had there. But I can definitely see the point there for sure.
I would totally do an electric harp.
Nice. It does look fun. I mean, it looks like a lot of dexterity as far as the way to pluck and the fluidity and the graceful way that they play them. Definitely looks cool. Now, I've had piano teachers even that had that same amount of grace when they were playing arpeggios. Even like they would sit there and they had this circular motion with their hands, like you can't even necessarily see it. See here, but it was like they were doing
Mouth
this
harp.
like
What?
a circular motion. Mouth harp is when he's like meow, 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 meow.
Oh, does it have that twang? That's
That has the twang. That's a mouth harp. Yeah, that's one style of mouth harp. Harmonicas are also a mouth harp, but they also could call that a few other different things.
well, they do call it a harp. Ah, that's what you meant then. A harp.
The mouth harp.
Yeah,
But I mean,
Kiwi
you definitely don't
Chris.
have pedals. You definitely don't have pedals for the harmonica.
Kiwi Chris was the first one. I'd never really thought of harmonicas as harps. I'd never really heard the term until I came on Band Lab, and she sent me a message asking if I could play the harp. And I thought she was talking about harp, and I was like, well, I can play it on the keyboards, and it sounds pretty authentic. And then she came back and said she meant like, oh no, I mean like the harmonica mouth harp. I had never heard the term
Yeah.
before that. So I was like, whoa, okay, I can play harmonica on keyboard, but just like guitar, I would say I'm not the best choice because simulating a harmonica really well on a keyboard, it's a fucking bitch. A real harp player can whip out a good track much
Yeah.
more effectively.
And not everybody loves the expression, but actually the ways of playing, like we were talking before about having different harmonicas for different keys, right? So if I had my C harmonica, but you're playing in G, technically there's a way of being able to play that. Like they call it cross harp and I think slant harp. So like there's 3 different keys that you could play a C harmonica, but it's about playing it differently. You're playing a different way to focus on that chord. Like I was saying, if you have the 1, the 4,
So
and the 5
you're
chords.
playing in C, but you're diatonically you're modal shifting with the
Well, what he's saying is he's
harmonica.
using an A harp to play in E minor, and to me it would be the A harp would be to play in um, would be if that's the major, then F sharp minor. To me, because that's the one that's right behind it. But E minor, that would just be playing it 1 down from there. So from the A, yeah, I mean that would be playing the
So
fourth,
you'd
right?
be looking for your relative harp.
Yeah, so the relative minor. There you go. Yeah, because the A minor would be to the C. C would be the major, A would be the minor. So the A would be the major. You go back down 3 half steps to get to the minor. Relative minor of A would be F sharp minor. Nice. But
Yeah,
yeah,
gotta
cross harp and
burn
slant harp
that.
are the 2 different.
I gotta burn that major scale sound into my head
Mhm.
to practice my other scales. You
Yeah.
gotta really remember what a major scale sounds like as you try to do it with each key.
Mhm. And like he's saying, the style is focuses on drawing in air instead of blowing air, and that's what we were talking about before. When you blow the air on the C harmonica, you're blowing a C, and if you're pulling in, you're actually playing a G. So you're playing the 5th chord, but the D
Oh,
is on the
wait a
bottom.
minute. You're saying the harmonica's tuned to hit one pitch going out and different pitch on the inhale?
There's 10 different holes, and each hole has two different sounds: the push and the pull. So like as you push on like if it's a C harmonica, you blow, you're pushing through that lowest hole, you're getting a low C, and if you pull, you're getting a D. Then you blow, you're getting an E. Pull, you're getting not an F, but you're getting a G. And then you're pushing, you're getting a G, and then you're getting an A, and a
Now, how
C.
many harmonica players do you think actually think about that note theory while they play? Because harmonica players always seem to be so in the zone, natural. Like, I just learned how to play harmonica because I sat in jail one night.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you can do that's very simple. And like I was saying with the blowing, like if you just blow through the harmonica and just go from the low notes to the high notes back and forth, you're just playing, literally every note you're playing is C, E, G, C, E, G, C. Like that's all 10 notes, like or I guess another octave, C, E, G, C, E, G, C, E, G, C.
Yeah, and if you're doing something like blues or like, that old school country, it's all you need.
And the thing is, when you're pulling, drawing air in, basically you would be doing, you would think it would be D, F, A, and going up like that, being the other notes in between. But because you wanted to have the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, the 5 chord is that G, which in that first, or in that second inversion, you're doing D, G, B, right? And that's what you have as the 3 draw holes. So you're going C, D, E, G, G, which is weird. So the push and the pull on that third hole on the harmonica is both G. And there is the mask.
There's the mask. He
Sup,
looks
Soap?
like ready for business too. Oh, damn.
And he ran away.
I came to
Mhm.
to warn you.
And you could say vowel sounds into it. Yep. To me, the thing with we were talking about the bending on a harmonica before, and again, that's like you're pulling in, but you're trying to like. It's almost like if you're going like you're trying to like deepen the amount of air you're pulling in, or you're trying to pull in air faster than just trying to pull the way you were before. So you're trying to go like trying to like pull the air in that way, and that's how you can get that
Slurp,
sound.
slurp there.
Almost, yeah. It's one of those things that once you've actually done it a couple times, it totally starts to feel natural to be able to do it. But trying to describe it to someone who's never done it feels kind of weird. But the sound of chaw, like being able and dropping your jaw really low, like chaw, like you're going, and you're pulling in all that air, so that's what causes it to pull in air faster than it would normally, and that overbends the reed or underbends when you're pulling, causes it to drop the note. Mouth shape also matters, and you've seen people play where they use the hands, and the amount of covering that you're doing with the hands makes a big difference too.
Well, isn't that like the kind of muting technique
Yep.
with the brass, like the hands
It's both muting, but it also changes the tone of the notes. So like it could sound like you're going from full
give it
muting
like
to
a vibrato or a
yeah,
shake.
yeah, exactly. That's part of where that comes from.
See, I love the instruments that kind of lend to singing technique, because a lot of that is almost like singing tech, mouth shape. These are things.
Air pressure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you think about them in a lot of different ways with sound.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
But you know what we should do? We're probably gonna have to reset the stream because he won't have but an hour, if
That's
that.
true. In that case, we shall say good evening, folks. Thanks for joining us for our Thursday night shenanigans, like usual. We'll be back another time.
I'm in constant shenanigans.
Shenanigan mode. But stay tuned. We're going to drop the stream, like Tony said. We're going to start it back up again so that we can get Soul Makeup in here and have him have more time than he needs, because as of now, he'd only have 45 minutes. And that's no good.
Yes, because Electronic Thursday becomes Friday.
That's right. So thanks again for joining us, and we will get that restarted for you momentarily.
Thanks for the jam, everyone.